Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the special council meeting of July 20th to order. Begin by asking council for approval of the agenda. However, there are three changes that I would like to, or three items that I would like to address here as we approve this, or ask council to approve this. Number one, I would like to add RI 6. That is to add the mayor and council report sections. We'll just add that after page 195, just to add in RI 6 so we can do some verbal updates. Our second item regarding RI 1 is I would like to remove pages 182 to 186 from the staff report, as we will be dealing with this under UB1, the unfinished business, and we'll be dealing with that portion together at that time. The third item is just to include the supplementary information. So I'll ask council for a motion to approve the agenda as amended with inclusion of the yellow pages. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Casper. Any comments or questions regarding that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So tonight, as you can see, we have a special presentation. We have Mr. Gavin Larrick in the audience today. So I'd like to just turn the microphone over to Chief Sorensen, if you could take over and go through the presentation with us. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Tate, members of council, firefighters, guests, and special guests. Just after midnight on July 2nd, young Gavin Larrick awoke to, from what I'm told, sneak out and watch cartoons. But as he passed the laundry room door of their home, Gavin observed something wrong. It appeared there was a fire in their laundry room. Gavin quickly ran to his parents' room, banged on the door, and then that didn't work. He started kicking on the door for more noise. This got their attention, letting them know there was a fire in their home. While the rest of the family, along with two cousins who had stayed over, evacuated the house, Gavin's dad, Craig, grabbed a garden hose and managed to extinguish the fire, likely with only moments to spare before the entire laundry room was ablaze. The fire department arrived, ensured the fire was completely out, and to make sure everyone was safe. While some minor injuries were sustained in fighting the fire, Gavin's early warning ensured that everyone got out safely and the house was saved. When asked how Gavin knew what to do, he replied he'd learned about fire safety at his school, John Muir Elementary. Tonight, the Sault Fire Department would like to honor Gavin for his heroic actions and present him with a special award. Congratulations, Gavin, on a well job.
Thank you, Gavin, and I understand that there's a special cake and refreshments in the firefighters' lounge for you to enjoy with our fire crew. So thank you so much. Council, there's no cake for us. Okay, so move on into the agenda. There are some seats, so for any folks standing, if you could please join us and take a seat, that would be awesome. And I'd like to welcome, we have 2 delegations this evening. Each delegation is allotted 5 minutes, and I would like to welcome D1, Jane Beddoes, for Tour de Rock Cops for Cancer, to the microphone. So when you come up to the podium, actually, I believe the red light's on, so that way we can all hear you. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Tate, Council. I'm here representing the Tour de Rock Cops for Cancer. In 1998, police officers, actually in Victoria City Police, where I worked as a 911 operator, started a ride to raise funds in a big way for research to end childhood cancers, to find a cure for childhood cancers, and also to help send children with cancer to camp. They decided it would be a brilliant idea, I don't know why, because to ride from Port Hardy down to the tip of our island, 1,000 kilometers, and on the way visit small communities, and each community would do fundraising. Souk has been instrumental in raising funds since its inception. Souk has been a little bit out of the way. We usually got the tour in Souk at 5 o'clock at night when it caused a lot of traffic jams. Nobody was too thrilled to see these riders, slowing them down from getting home for their dinner. So we've been petitioning the Canadian Cancer Society for years, and finally, 3 years ago, we do have the tour coming into Souk at a reasonable time, 2 o'clock, and they go to the schools. Now, the schools are where the children are, and we have had unfortunately, many children in Souk who have had cancer, who have fought cancer, and actually have won. Unfortunately, we've had some that didn't win their battles. So what I'm here tonight to do is, on September 30th, the tour will be coming into Souk. They're going to be going to John Muir School approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We don't have a rider this year. We have been lucky to have many in the past years. But this year, Souk won't be fundraising for one specific rider. Last year, Staff Sergeant Steve Wright, we raised over $17,000 in one day for the jail-a-thon that we held for him. But I'm hoping to get all of Souk behind our endeavor to keep Souk on the map, to keep Souk in the forefront with our efforts to raise funds for these cancer awareness. So I'm here today to ask you as council to proclaim September 30th as Tour de Rock Day in Souk. That way, I'm hoping we can get all the businesses behind our efforts. Not that they haven't been before. Souk's been so amazingly supportive and has done a ton to raise money. And we've got many families, the Piakowskis, the Dorvals, the Osseltons. Their kids are junior riders. And it's especially neat this year is Daisy Irwin, baby Daisy, that the community all got behind, is celebrating 10 years clear of cancer. So there's going to be big celebrations. We're planning on having a big dance and all that sort of thing. So it would be great if we could proclaim September 30th as Tour de Rock Day in Souk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beddoes, and thank you for coming and sharing the presentation with us. Councillor Parkinson, then Casper.
I would like to move that the District of Souk declare September 30th as Tour de Rock Day.
Okay. Should it be proclaim instead of declare?
Proclaimed. You can.
Okay. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Casper, did you have a question?
Well,
Microphone.
I fully embrace the efforts of the Tour de Rock and especially for the young people. I'm a 7.5-year survivor, clear of cancer, and I know that it can be devastating to both individuals affected and family members. So I just want to applaud the efforts of all those involved and the supporters of Souk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Casper. Thank you, Council. Okay, excellent. So we'll move on to D2, and I'd like to welcome the Mayor's Public Advisory Panel on Arts and Beautification to the microphone, please. And welcome panel members.
Sandy Jarvis, 2349 French Road North.
Loretta Borkamp, 2377 DiMammio.
Okay, we're here today on behalf of the advisory panel to the Mayor on Arts and Beautification with two requests. Number one, we have an ongoing project, and we would like to request that the First Nations signage be installed on the boardwalk as soon as possible. The First Nations interpretations can be installed at a later date, but the pictures are beautiful and will look great down there on the boardwalk next to the other ones.
That's a different project.
Okay. The next one, our new project, is the Canada 150 Mosaic. It's going to be, if approved, it will be on Wadham's Way. It'll be a community mural, and it will be a farm sign painting. It'll be 750 pieces to be painted by members of the community. Any skill level is welcome. All ages are welcome, and you do not have to be an artist. Each tile, which are 4x4 tiles, are in size, creating a unified community mural. So each tile together creates one large picture. It'll create a lasting legacy landmark of Canada's 150th celebration. And our community mural would include a mural designed by Louis Lavoie, uniquely representing our community. The Canada 150 Mosaic team travels to Souk to facilitate painting workshops. It includes all materials, travel and administration costs, up to 750 community and members involved, mounting, clear coating, and photography ready to hang, and 100 poster prints of our completed community mural. Online presence, virtually connecting to other communities in Canada on the 150mosaic.com site. And to that end, the Arts and Beautification Committee are requesting that the District of Souk respectfully consider the sponsorship for the Canada 150 Mosaic in the amount of $12,500. Any questions?
Thank you. A question for Mr. Dillabaugh. There you are. Thank you. In terms of the sponsorship, is there funds in the SPA funding? Would you know where that funding would come from?
Thank you, Your Worship. The current year budget has $10,000 allocated out of the SPA funding for capital projects. A portion of that has been spent to date,
Okay.
so the remainder could come out of that, and the rest of it, it's up to council really. My recommendation is either fund the rest of it out of council contingency or direct us to fund more out of the SPA. The SPA reserve has more than $10,000 in it. That's just what was allocated in the capital budget, so it would be to just amend that and fund more of it out of the SPA reserve to fund the entire amount this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Councillor Parkinson?
I would just like to say, too, that the funds for the projects, for the art project, do not come from taxpayer funding. It's from development permit fees, which developers pay 2% towards for all art projects for the District of Souk. So it's not taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Councillor Berger, then Casper.
Thank you. I just have a question. So with the project, there's obviously grant funding. Is there grant funding from the Canada 150?
Yes.
Okay. So
It's a $25,000 project. They pay half,
Half and
and
half.
we pay half.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pardon me, Councillor Casper?
Well, I think it's a worthy project, but we're sort of caught at a bit of a disadvantage because we have no paperwork in front of us other than just the Canada 150 Mosaic information. Is there a deadline as to when a grant application has to be made and a commitment?
May I answer that?
Yes, Councillor Parkinson?
So with this project, we're not guaranteed to even be included in it. They only take 15 communities from from each of the provinces across Canada. So 7 or 8 have already been approved and have started the project, so we won't be into it. So we need permission to go forward with the application. And no actual deadline was set, but the sooner we get it in, the better it is.
The 150,
Sorry.
the 150th anniversary is July 1st, 2017.
So that's when it has to be completed by,
Yeah.
if we're accepted.
And don't get me wrong, it's just that, I'm sure you've witnessed around this table
Yes, I
that
have.
when we make decisions, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, on the
I know.
fly, we sort of find out afterwards that, okay, it really wasn't that much, and oh, by the way, it's going to cost us more. And there's a whole pile of other worthy projects that I'm sure are in the hopper.
I hear
So, even if it meant, approval in principle, and it's enough to send an application, I would appreciate, just for our benefit, some financial breakdown and a budget, and
I can
so
get
that
you
we
that.
have that. Because, we don't have that information in front of us.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Appreciate what you're saying.
So, thank you.
Councillor Pearson, then Parkinson?
Yeah, and thank you for your presentation tonight, and I think it does sound like a worthwhile project, and again, echo Councillor Casper's sentiments, is that, you put up a nice mural, you have it to hang on, and, where does it go, and how much is that going to cost us, and where, those are the things. And I think I heard you suggest Wadham's Way?
It is. We
Okay.
did suggest Wadham's Way. From our committee, it was decided on Wadham's Way.
Okay.
And because Wadham's Way is named after Wadham's Farm,
Mm-hmm.
and farming is a big part of Souk, we figured it would be an appropriate mural.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I'm not questioning the validity of the committee, or the committee. It's just that, we're spending an awful lot of money in our downtown beautification, and I was just wondering if this was going to fit into that project as well. So I have some questions around the infrastructure costs of it, and then that location, but, I'll trust the committee on that. So.
We can get back to you with information on that.
Thank you.
When would you like us to come back?
Well, our next scheduled meeting would be in September,
Okay?
So,
and so would there be,
I can apply for an application to see if we can come back for that meeting.
okay, thank you, Councillor Parkinson?
So all the costs are included in that 12.5. So the installation of it, putting it all together, there's no extra money to put it up there on the wall. So that's all included into it with the mounting and clearing. So as in the previous number of years, the minutes have just gone out, and the minutes will be on the reader board. That's normally where they have been. And so this portion that they were given is taken from what's going to be in the minutes. And what was added to your agenda package was the information about the Canada Mosaic and what the project all entails and what it's about.
Councillor Ray?
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I do support it in principle, but I'm one of the councillors, I think, that consistently makes a comment about us making financial decisions on the fly, as Councillor Casper has indicated. And I think for myself, that's something that I have to provide consistency as projects come before council, that if I'm going to say it to one, I need to say it to everybody. So I do support it in principle, but I do think we should have a staff report that reflects what you're doing and provides the information to us about all the costs, and then that can come back before. That's how I feel anyhow, but there is a motion on the floor.
Sorry, I'm not certain who's made that motion. Okay,
They made the request.
okay. Councillor Parkinson?
So for the previous 3 years as the chair for the Mayor's Arts and Beautification Panel, we have all come forward, the three of us, at previous times for all these projects. We have done it identically to what we have done right now, and there has been never a staff report on it because it is a committee that is for a mayor's committee, not a staff committee, and we have put forward all the recommendations. And you have agreed to, I'd say, 98% of all the projects that were put forward for the past 3 years. So I would just like for my committee, Sandy chairs it, but so that we have exactly what the new parameters are going to be for this committee and what you would like to see the committee actually do.
Councillor Parkinson, or pardon me, Councillor Berger?
Thank you. And while I appreciate what Councillor Parkinson is saying, this is $12,500. That's a lot of money. While I think that this is a lovely project, I don't know that I'm sold on spending $12,500 for a mural on Wadham's Way at this time. We are spending an awful lot of money in our town center. There's going to be things that are going to be coming up with our town center as far as banners and lampposts and all these different things that we want to beautify with. I'm wrestling with this because it's a big ticket item. And like Councillor Parkinson said, in most cases, absolutely, we give you the sign of approval right then and there, but this is a larger sum of money, so I'm wrestling with it right now.
Councillor Logans?
There were two things that you asked for. I just wanted
Yes.
to make a note that the first one of the First Nation signage on the boardwalk, I definitely support that. Thanks for bringing
Thank you.
that up. Also, with the location of this mural project, I think it's an excellent part of town for something like that. I just really struggle with the budget and not having enough detailed information as well. So it'd be great if you could come back with that. And I also wonder, is there something we can do ourselves there that might cost a bit less?
I honestly don't know. But
Councillor Casper?
Maybe you'd mentioned it. Whereabouts on Wadham's Way is it
Okay.
going to occur?
you know where that concrete wall is? So if you were coming from Souk
The
Road-
stone wall?
The stone wall,
Right.
right there. On that wall on the Wadham's Way side.
And how much area would it encompass, roughly? Okay, I didn't see those. Pardon? 8 by 12. It's going to be fairly high, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I appreciate where council's sitting with this. Just a comment, though, is that there's only so many communities that are selected as part of this initiative, so we could easily do our own mural at any time. This is all part of Canada's 150th anniversary, so it's part of sort of showcasing Souk as part of what's happening across the country. So that's where, we could go back and forth on this. Just we may not be eligible. We may not have. We can come back in September and support it then, but other communities would have already been picked for the opportunity, and then it doesn't exist. So that's just something to be mindful of here. So. Councillor, I'm not sure who's first, probably Ray, then Parkinson.
Just for clarification, though, I didn't hear you say that there was a date that these had to be in, because I would suspect if they're looking at choosing, they're not going to just take first come, first serve. They're going to look at who comes forward. So is there a date?
No, they didn't have a date on their website. It's a matter of you contact them and they get back to you. So far, Bakerville in Quebec has theirs done, and it's in the form of a train car, and the whole thing will be a train car across Canada. For the Canada Winter Games, there was one done in Vancouver. It's of two orcas, a mama and a baby, and in these murals, it's all these separate little pictures that make up one large mural, a real mosaic, and so if you look at the picture, it looks like two orcas, but if you get up close and look, it's all these separate pictures that people have done. And it's quite interesting and quite lovely, and I think it would make something memorable and long-lasting for Souk.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with entertaining it, but I feel that we need to have a proper report. And yes, that may have been the practice, that I was part of the former council. Yes, but what I found is that a number of times we have approved on the fly, and we end up sort of paying for it later. So it's just a new place that I come from in this council.
Councillor Parkinson?
So two things. Would we be able to fund it, half of it through this year and half of it through next year, so that we don't use all of the funding? Because the project has to be completed within 2 years. So then we wouldn't have to have it all completed this year. We could carry on, right? So then we wouldn't use the funding from the arts for both. That would be one of the suggestions. And I can't remember what the other one was. Thanks.
Councillor Ray?
I'm going to move a motion to have this go back for a staff report and to just address the questions such as Councillor Parkinson's proposed in terms of how it can be paid, answer the financial pieces both for the mural and any other possible costs. And I would ask that staff work with Ms. Boker-Camp and Ms. Jarvis.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Can you turn on your microphone?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Councillor Casper.
Am I speak to it?
Yes, please.
So, Under the definition of community investment, that could come from any source,
It could.
right? And so there's nothing stopping your good group from actually entering into an application process. And then you identify a source, you just say that, yes, you're committed to raise this much money over a 2-year period or whatever it is, 2 budget years, or this is what you want to get from the community. You don't necessarily have to name sources per se. You
Right.
just make a commitment that that's what's going to happen. If you can't raise the money, you're not going to get the grant.
Right.
And so I like the idea of spreading it over two cycles, because we only budgeted $10,000 this year, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Great. Well, that's a good solution. Nice compromise.
Councillor Parkinson?
So then, if they go ahead and apply to be part of this project, because you don't want to wait till September, it might be too late as we suggested, do we have council's approval to move forward to apply to be part of it?
Okay, the first motion is to send this back for a staff report on all the pieces. The other one is, I suppose, it doesn't, to me,
Well, we can,
include, but you could add an amendment that does council want to recommend that the group apply, or do you want to wait for the report? I think that's what I'm asking. That is what I'm asking. Does this include
I think we just.
the go-ahead to apply for the program, or do you want to wait till everything comes back before they apply? Any comment on that? No?
Well, I want to know if we have.
Okay, thank you, yes.
Well, I think they should apply.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with that. But again, it's still subject to some community money coming forward. And there is a bit of a risk. If the money doesn't come forward, you don't get the grant. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so I would, I don't know if it's a friendly amendment, but that we authorize approval for the application.
Okay, that's what I want.
I think they want your money guaranteed to apply.
Well, it didn't say that. It just said.
It doesn't say that. No,
It
you're
just
right.
said community sources or
Okay.
community contribution or something.
Councillor Parkinson, then Ray.
So we'll go forward, we'll put in an application with council approval in principle to apply, and then staff will do a report on it, just to have our name out there to go forward with it, correct?
Yeah, so I suppose,
And they do, and it's not that when you say for funding, they're not going out fundraising, right? Or are they getting, the money's there for art projects for the district to suit. So that's what they're doing, right? So if it's over 2 years, that's fine. And then people are running from us in town. Always asking, turning around saying, can you give this, can you give that, right? So.
the committee was structured to deal with the SPA reserve fund
That's
that we've
exactly
been
right.
collecting. That is the sole
That's
purpose
right.
of it. So this is where we're getting recommendations to access that. So the motion as it stands, I think it needs a friendly amendment that the advisory panel proceed with the application and that a further staff report will be forthcoming in September. And then we can put it all together and go
Well,
from there.
I was prepared to make that friendly
Okay,
amendment.
so
if
that's
it's
your friendly
accepted,
amendment.
yes.
Okay, could someone second that, please? Seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion on the amendment? We're all clear that the group's applying for this, okay? So I'll ask for approval of the friendly amendment. All those in favor? Opposed to the amendment? Okay, now we're back to the main motion. We all get that? Councillor Ray?
And I just want the staff report to also look at, there's two options, and I do appreciate that you've asked for the 8x12 at $12,500, but there is the 8x8, and it's at a lower price of $10,000.
We
So
don't like
I
that
think it
one.
should be
Yes.
considered.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I just want to go back to the first piece
Thank
about
you.
the signage on the boardwalk,
Yes.
the artwork.
Ma-
Councillor Parkinson?
With the paintings for the boardwalk, the district hired 2 artists to paint, and Michelle DeRoche did the paintings for one, and we have the write-up. So it's like for the sea lions, for the whales, for
The heron.
all different things, and they have the write-up. And so the First Nations were also doing their interpretation of the same pictures. So the pictures have been painted. They've been sitting there for 6 years now for the First Nations. We don't have the write-ups completed. They've been given out for them to approve them for us to put them up, but we would like the pictures up. They've been sitting there far too long.
And they're lovely.
Okay, so if I could get a motion then that the artwork be installed on the boardwalk. Moved by Councillor Logans, that it be seconded by Councillor Casper. Any discussion on installing the boardwalk? I'm guessing that staff could do that. Okay, so we'll get the artwork up in a timely manner. Any further comments on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, so we have some unfinished business as UB1. There's the fire department service level review. We talked about this at the last meeting on June the 22nd, and in your agenda package this evening, you'll see a revised, we were looking for the items to be a bit condensed, and then Councillor Ray has also provided a further summary of these items, which Council's received. It's come in a bit late, so unfortunately the public doesn't have this because it came in after 5. That's nothing against. Thank you for putting it together. So at this point, it's a matter of which way Council wants to proceed with this, and that is to look at putting out the RFP, as you see, is together in the package to look at the items. The other thing I thought, though, was if we don't proceed with all of the items through the consultant, we still need to look at addressing those items. We could look at forming a committee that would go through and flesh out these points. And so it's a matter, do you want to consider a committee that's going to look at the information that's been gathered to date and then say, okay, we believe we have all this sort of pieces in-house, and then perhaps these items can go off to the consultant? Or are we looking to send all of this to the consultant right off the go-ahead? And then there's the items that you see on page 9, and then that's been further condensed to Item 7. I'm going to ask Councillor Ray if you can just maybe share, because I haven't had time to read yours to compare it to what's been provided in the package. If you could maybe just
Certainly.
explain sort of where you've come to with these points.
All right. Thank you, Your Worship. The original intent of going down this road was to provide Council with a high overview of just the Souk Fire Rescue Service and how it would best be optimized in the district. And that's looking at resourcing as well as some legislation. There's the playbook that's now in place. There's the BC building codes. There's those legislative pieces, and as well as the capital, both the minor and the major. So one of the things when the package came before us last time was I felt that it was very granular, getting really more into how you set up policy and running the department, and that wasn't really the intention that I personally had. It was sort of that more high level review. So in terms of these 7, I can pretty well break it down a bit. Number 1 stands the same. Number 2 is a new one that I added, I'm suggesting, and that is looking at all of the legislation and identify any gaps in services, making recommendations to Council how to bring the Souk Fire Rescue Service into compliance. And there may not be any gaps, but I think when it comes to legislation, we need to always make sure, first and foremost, that we are meeting our legislative requirements. Number 3 sort of lines up with number 2 in the original schedule here, except that I've identified that really it's the Souk zoning bylaw, because it's our bylaw that determines the height of our buildings and how we have zoned the district of Souk, but also being mindful of what the growth and development is looked at in our community plan. but that is only a guideline. So I don't want the person who, or the company that gets this, to think that they have to come up with a crystal ball and come up with a service for our fire department saying that what's in the community plan will be exactly what will be built, because as we've seen already, there has been some divergence from that. So number 4 is a combination of 3, 4, and 5. I think it's just, again, it's just sort of looking at the current delivery of fire service and making recommendations as to the best utilization of resources. And that's all resources. That's human resources, that's the materials, the buildings. It's a comprehensive review of that utilization. And looking at what the legislative requirements are, the Fire Commissioner's Playbook, the recommendations from the Fire Underwriters Survey that was completed in 2010. And then if you are going to compare to other communities, make sure that we have those communities identified in terms of population levels, commercial structures, equipment, paid staff, volunteers. And I've also included in other variables, because I'm not a firefighter. I don't have a lot of experience in all those pieces to it, hence why I had suggested the review. So that whoever comes in to do this will be able to gauge if there are other variables that should be included. Number 5 is basically the number 6 in the package, word for word, except I spelled firefights instead of firefighters. Number 6 is an amalgamation of all of the items in terms of the budget, and just asking whoever gets the contract to look at all the submissions that have come to council for budget purposes for both minor and major, including the 20-year plan that was completed by our fire chief and Mr. Lures. And then looking at making recommendations in terms of, for budgeting purposes, what's essential, what's not essential, and looking at what the 2015 cost analysis would be. And that there be a schedule for the replacement of the fire apparatus in terms of what's essential, and whether or not it needs to be new, can it be refurbished or reconditioned, and what kind of schedule. And of course, as in number 3 in the paper that I distributed tonight, at 3 and 6 is that all of this has to be done in the context of our priority of the strategic priority for the district, and that's around the financial responsibility. And then number 7 matches number 11 in the package. So I've just sort of condensed and sort of broadened without being too specific. I think if you get too specific in a schedule, you run the risk of ending up with a report that could cost you $50,000, and that was never the intent. It was a high overarching document to provide guidance to council that would be objective and neutral. So that's what's in Schedule C.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ray, and this is a priority of this council, so I think it's great that we've gone to this to sort of condense and we understand here. And from what I understand from your comments, like there's 7 now instead of 11, but nothing has been deleted. It's just combining or perhaps expanding, or is something
Nothing particular, I don't believe, has been deleted, but it's softened. Some of the wording I was a little concerned about. It was sort of gauging the direction, and I don't think that was purposely, but when you talk about, let me just, determine if current fire station locations best serve the future needs of the community, and if warranted, provide recommendation on alternative locations. That then starts to suggest that we are open to looking at other locations, and I think we are looking at what we have and what are we missing, what are the gaps in that. Benchmarks and timelines to increase. I think that's all about capital budgeting. And the one thing I did add in the last one is that the confidential report comes to mayor and council and the CAO as opposed to just the mayor and CAO.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Logans, then Casper.
Thank you, Councillor Ray, for putting this together, because I was looking at it going, how can we make it more squishy? So I think that this helps what I was thinking in my mind as well. And I agree with what you were saying as well, Mayor Tate, about doing as much in-house, or at least looking at doing as much in-house as possible. I think that that would be the first step before taking this out to tender.
Councillor Casper, then Parkinson.
Yeah, so the idea then is to use this newly proposed Schedule C to replace the Schedule C that was in the original RFP, correct? That included 22 recommendations?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Secondly, I think that if we start with this process right now, then it can identify shortfalls that we may have, and then it would be then timely to go with some independent review and recommendations to then possibly strike a committee or enter into another process on how you implement those gaps that have been identified. Because I think that's critical. Identify what the actual needs are as opposed to the wants. And when that's done, and when we do it in a fiscally prudent way, because that's our number one goal. That's been this council's approach, is that we have to look through things with a fiscal eye. And then once that process is complete, then we then can embark on what you're suggesting, and it would perhaps even be suggested in the report that more items have to be done or some additional processes take place.
So you'd like to start with sending this out to a consultant
I
first?
think so, because then we've got something to work on.
Okay.
Then if there is a committee struck, whether it's made up of some staff and some council members, i.e. the finance group.
The
right?
long-term planning group, yeah.
The long-term planning group, then there's 3 councillors involved, and there is an opportunity for staff to be involved in that process. So I just want to thank Councillor Ray for what she's done.
Councillor Parkinson?
So the previous council already had a number of reviews completed. I'm not sure what the cost for these reviews were. I was under the understanding from being in the audience that the fire department is in compliance. I'm not sure why we think they're not. I'd also like to know what the amount is that we are going to be paying this, whoever gets a contract, what the cost is that will be coming out this time. And when I read Derek's letter, Mr. Luer's letter, I'm in agreement with him by his statement of, I suppose you can keep getting more consultants and more reports until you get the answers that you want. But I find this to be a bad use of resources and an insult to our current paid staff, who are supposed to be able to advise council and with whom council has 100% trust. When I read his report, he worked with the fire chief, he worked on his own, he went and got all the results. I don't know why we have to pay someone else to get the same information when you have numerous reports already completed.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you. A couple of items just to respond to Councillor Parkinson. The previous council Mayor Milne did bring to council to spend $10,000 on an independent outside review, as there continually were questions about how best for our fire department to handle the finances. The fire department, and I stand corrected, Mr. Dillabaugh, is probably our most expensive department for the District of Sault taxpayers. And as a strategic priority, I think it's appropriate for us to make sure, given the costs that are associated with the fire department, that there is an independent process to make sure that we are on the right track. At no time did I say, and as I did qualify in my comments, I'm not saying that there's a gap, but at any type of review, it is always prudent in that review to make sure that legislative requirements are being met. And as I said, I didn't say that there were gaps, but I think that that is part of a review. The only other piece that I would suggest, if it's possible, Your Worship, neither Mr. Howie or Mr. Dillabaugh or the fire chief have had an opportunity to look at what I wrote. And I'm just wondering if it would be possible to postpone to later, table to later in the meeting to give them an opportunity to take a peek at it and provide feedback. They do have copies of the report. And I just think that it's important to have that conversation if Mr. Howie would like that time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howie?
Your Worship, during the earlier part of the meeting, I read your summary, compared it to the one that staff had put forward, and from my perspective, you've already outlined the differences in the two proposals. The question of benchmarking, looking at other municipal operations and taking some of that out. And I don't have any difficulty with what remains. I'm not sure the fire chief or Mr. Dillabaugh had a chance to read it, but they might have comments as well.
Okay. No, I'm fine proceeding. You know, I hear what's been said about that we've done these reviews and they're sitting there, we haven't done anything, and I'm comfortable doing one with a consultant, provided, and I think council has been set on this in our priorities, that we begin implementing. And we haven't implemented the reports that have come to date thus far over the years. I can't really answer why that is. It just hasn't happened. And so that's why in strategic planning we had allocated some funds this time for long-term plans. I think about $20,000. Is that correct, Mr. Dillabaugh?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and that's where we wanted to find something that fits. And, you know, obviously if it goes out to RFP, if it's beyond that, then we need to make a decision on how we look at scaling it back. But this is going to be a bit of a process, and we do need to come up with action points to start implementing things, because there's pieces all over the place and it's turning into a bit of a mess, which isn't serving anyone well. So I'd like us to be very clear on the road that we're going to move down. I thought of the committee piece first, just thinking, is there some that, thinking of the cost element of some items that could be done so that nothing is left behind, because if it's a case where you scale things down, and I know when we started at the first one with 22, it's because there was duplications in some ways. So we haven't eliminated anything. It's just different language. We're not getting rid of it. It's all there. It's just a bit more clear now in terms of what council's looking for. And so it's the case if it doesn't go to a consultant, then we still need to talk about it. We still need a plan, and we still need to move forward. So it's just a matter, does the committee come before the consultant? Does the cult, go before the committee? And that's sort of where we're at now. I hear what you're saying, though, Councillor Parkinson, that we've done this work. We have all these surveys. It is timely to pull this all together now to move forward, and perhaps having an outside entity take a look at this and work might put us on a clear path, perhaps. We have had excellent success with the consultant that we engaged to set our strategic priorities, so that's where I am comfortable moving down that path. That's just my view. There are a few hands up. Councillor Pearson, I believe, then Parkinson, and then, okay.
Well, and thank you, Mayor Tate. Your sentiments are pretty much in line with what I was thinking. Is again, that I think that we don't have to look very far to understand that municipalities across North America, not in just Canada, are suffering from a financial crisis and we're lined up for a disaster, and we have to prepare for the costs that are coming at us. So in all respect to some of the reports that have been done, to Councillor Parkinson's comments, I think this is about putting it all together and giving us a set of priorities that we have a comfort level with. I would think this is a report card. We always talk about shortfalls, but we may in fact be overfalling in some areas where we're over-servicing, and maybe there's ways for us to look at this report and come up with synergies with other departments and things. And I hope that this report gives us that, because again, the fire department comes out to an emotional issue. People talk in the terms of fire department, fire protection, from an emotional point of view as opposed to a pragmatic point of view. And what I'm hoping is from a third party is that we get a pragmatic approach to where we should be now and where we should be in the future, because lumped into this is one heck of a pile of tax implications. Mm-hmm. And I think that the public has to understand, we're not just debating about spending money on a consultant. We're talking about the future of Souk and the future of Souk taxpayers, because there isn't a single bigger issue, not only for our district, but for other districts across, like I said, Canada and North America. that there's no bigger issue. So we have to do our job, and I think we're prudent by hiring a consultant at this point. And I think it will give us that direction. So thank you, Councillor Ray, for your work on this as well.
Councillor Parkinson?
So I just have a question through you, your mayor. Is the fire department the most expensive department that we have?
Mr. Dillabaugh?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to clarify that as well. No, the policing is, and it's actually almost twice the cost of fire.
If I remember my comment, Your Worship, I said it was one of the most. Okay.
And I would like to also ask that last review that you did with the consultant cost $10,000, and so this one we're going to do now is $20,000. I just would like that clarified.
I'm not certain. Mr. Dillabaugh?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, we did not contract a consultant previously. It was brought forward to council, and council decided not to contract that consultant. So aside from some staff time of the fire chief, we have not spent any money on these reports previously.
Okay, thank you. And the next part to that question was, for this one to go out to tender, is it going to be the $20,000?
Through you, Your Worship, we don't know what the cost will be, and that will come in when it comes in, and then we will bring that forward to council when we get the submissions. Hopefully, it is within that range.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson and Mr. Dillabaugh. And that's where we're at now, is that there was the report done before. We didn't move ahead, and then as a result, nothing's happened, and everything's been languishing. And I think that's not good for the department. Councillor Casper?
Well, is it timely to do a motion?
Yes, thank you.
I'm prepared to make a motion that we go to RFP for this fire department review. It's the fire department service level review, and that we adopt the amended Schedule C, numbers 1 through 7.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Berger. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into our public question and comment period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to make any comment or question regarding the items that are specifically on tonight's agenda. There are public input opportunities in 7044 Maple Park Terrace, the 2015 annual meeting, as well as the public hearing. So if you do have any items related to those topics, you can wait till that particular item comes forward, because there is public input time specifically for that. So what we'll do is we'll entertain any comments for anything else, but it has to be specifically for tonight's agenda. And if you could please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Loretta Borkamp, 2377 DeMamio. I would just like to say emotionally that I think the people of Souk are very, very fortunate to have dedicated people like Fire Chief Steve Sorensen and the men and women of his department. They did a terrific job on the Grant Road fire. Kudos as well to the volunteer members of the emergency services who helped tirelessly with the people displaced from their homes by the fire. They were called at 1 o'clock. They didn't get home until 6:30 in the morning. And I'd also like to commend Stoop staff member, the engineer Elizabeth Nelson, who answered the calls regarding the traffic problems in Sun River. She attended in person and then immediately proceeded to set things in motion. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borkamp. Next speaker.
Your Worship, Honourable Councillors, Christina Schlattner. I live at 2384 Cedar Ridge Drive in Souk, and I am also with the Souk Bike Club, but I'm also a mom and a business person, and I've come here to speak in favor and in support of the Souk Bike and Multi-Use Trail Connector that was announced basically in February. Souk has many jewels to its credit. It has the Galloping Goose and the potholes amongst the top tier of those. And those were two amenities that were not unopposed in their time. They are now amongst the major draws of Souk and are enjoyed by most Soukies during the summer and winter alike. And we are now enjoying many new trails in Souk and many new opportunities to get out of our car, for kids to be safe, for elderly people to have access to Souk and downtown, a new vibrant downtown which is emerging. In 9 years since I've been here, several trails have been built, and they are well used, and I think they lend credit to Souk. The new trail that was announced in February is a essential addition to this trail network, I believe, because Souk Road in itself, as a travel route for children, for elderly people, for anyone who is not in a car, is not a safe way to travel. Many tourists go up to the potholes, use the Galloping Goose, and then they have no way to get to Souk. And many of us have experienced speaking to travelers who say, well, if I can't get into Souk in a safe way, I'm not going to go. And I have experienced this. I've also experienced many kids who are traveling unsafely on Souk Road. So I would like to say, finally, that the detractors of this bike connector are going backwards. And I would like to encourage you to support the connector. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schlattner. Next speaker.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Councillors. My name is Alan Kreutz. I'm 7770 West Coast Road, and also the owner of West Coast Outdoor Adventure Rentals, which is located at 6971 West Coast Road at the Souk Harbour Resort and Marina. We approximately see about 1,400 tourists a year. I'm reiterating what the previous speaker was saying. This map has dots on it that we started collecting last year, where we had visitors to Souk from in the world from last year and this year alone. The X's are this year. Taking one day last week, on the 17th, we had visitors from Iceland, Vancouver, Holland, Calgary, Main Island in the Gulf Islands, St. Louis, Utah, Victoria, New York and Israel in one day. I could go on and on about where they come from. We had one couple recently drove from Chicago to Souk in 2 days, purely to visit the Souk potholes and Mystic Beach waterfall. The lack of a non-route, for want of a better word, to the Galloping Goose is commented on daily in our business. And many families just will not ride along the roads to access it, so will either reluctantly drive to go visit the Souk potholes, the park anyway, or they just physically don't go to the potholes and beyond, of course, up toward the Leechtown area, or the Matheson Lake area, which is easily accessible from the Roche Cove entrance. When they arrive, they stay in the hotels, the B&Bs, the campgrounds. They eat from McDonald's to Mum's Cafe to the UK Foods, what was the Souk River store, to the Souk Harbour House. They fill up at the gas stations, shop at all the stores downtown, and as many of them are very European in origin, even those from all over the world, most people are even unaware of where they're from. They hand over their card, buy their groceries, walk away, other than a foreign credit card, which some don't even notice. This doesn't even include, of course, all the visitors who come and visit Souk, visit their friends and family that we have no contact with ourselves. The money brought into the community over the summer helps many businesses actually be in business, period. As without it, they could not survive the slower winter months. And many residents do most of their major shopping in the downtown Langford and box stores of Victoria and Langford, Other than a few families with children, our business won't actually benefit greatly, won't make much difference to us. They will most go anyway. They will put up with it. But Souk does sit in the middle of the two best sections of the trail. And it will send a message that we are keen to invest in visitors and locals' experiences when they're about alike, and that we are part of that Galloping Goose Trail, that people do travel all over the world to come and ride, let alone those who cycle, walk, however they get here from the Victoria end, down toward the Roche Cove end, or from the Souk Potholes campground who want to access themselves into Souk in a safe manner. In short, this is not really about cyclists. A lot of people say this is all about cyclists, and indeed most of our customers who actually rent from us don't even own bikes at home. They're not cyclists, they just want to enjoy what we have to offer. I wouldn't even say it's about healthy living or transportation. It's really not that much of a mindset in these people's minds. It is, in my opinion, about being tourists, bringing welcome dollars into our community, while the rest of us just get to enjoy it year-round, as was said. So, in short, I just want to put forward my support for the continuation of the connector up the Suk River Road to access the Galloping Goose Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kreutz.
Stephen Hendricks, 2179 Henland Drive, and with Transition Soup. I think a few years ago with the OCP, it was made pretty clear that our community wants this connector. It was in the top 5 items, I believe, if that's correct. I'm certainly in support of this connector, as are many people. For the reasons that Alan just mentioned, it is certainly good for the tourism, for our businesses, but it's also good just for our community, for us, for the residents of Suk who want to use the Galloping Goose, get there safely, and get home safely. It's a step in the right direction. It's part of the whole process. This one little section isn't the complete deal. There are little bits and pieces that we're going to have to get done as we go along. I personally have seen many people, and I've heard many stories of people who have been coming from the Victoria area, wanting to ride the goose and planning on going into Suk for getting a meal or whatever, and they end up in Leechtown. I think if I had $50 for everyone that did that, I could build a town in Leechtown and have everything that they're looking for there. But we need a proper facility, and we need the proper signage to show people how to get there. So I definitely want to support this. 2 other issues that I hope has been considered in the plans. I know they're talking about putting it on the old logging road. I think it's important that we try to minimize the grade changes in the path, so I'm not sure where they are with that. And also where going to cross Suk River Road, that makes sure that it is in a safe area. I'm sure the engineers have it all figured out, but because where it was once pointed out to me where that might cross is pretty close to the corner, and we want to make sure we have good sight lines there. So, but I think it's an excellent project, and it needs to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks.
Good evening. My name is Janet Rayner Thorne, 2154 Henland Drive. And I came to Suk about 10 years ago, and my first experience was on my way up to the West Coast Trail and had to come through Suk. Fell in love with it, fell in love with the fall fair at the time, and decided really when I was here that I wanted to live here. Went home, cycled here from the ferry the following year, and got to the end of the Galloping Goose Trail with my credit card in hand, with plans to go to Suk Harbor House, but I'd run out of steam. And I looked at that road and that hill and went no further. I did manage to get here, anyways, a couple of years later, but have been, and fallen in love and continue to absolutely love living in Suk. However, my primary disappointment has been that I can't ride my bike in Suk. It's really a problem for me, and as much I think about moving to Victoria so I can continue to get back into that lifestyle. Also a cancer survivor, so I'm really conscious of my health and my fitness and my lifestyle, and I'm really hoping I can continue to emphasize and to live that commitment while living in Suk. So please consider giving us that extension. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mary Call, 6698 Helgeson Road. Your Worship and Council. Yesterday as a family, we walked the side of the road all the way up to the potholes, and it was absolutely treacherous. Worth it once we got there, but it was treacherous. The traffic was constant all the way along, and the road is tight. The edge is totally unmarked, and drop-offs straight down to the river are shockingly close at spots. It's ridiculous. It's an accident waiting to happen, and it's a liability issue for the district for sure. In addition to being of great health and recreation benefit to families in Suk, a walking, cycling trail system would also support a thriving local economy in Suk, helping people get into the center of town more easily and enjoyably. The Galloping Goose is a huge asset to Souk, except that it doesn't actually go into Souk anywhere. Many people have commented to us over the years that they have expected to find their way into Souk, somewhere along the way, via a sign even, at the very least, but didn't. They'd have turned up at the bike shop, they'd have stopped for lunch, they'd have booked into a B&B, they'd have gone for dinner before moving on, but they didn't. In all of these ways, a walking cycling trail would absolutely be revenue generating, and it would be worth every penny of development. On all accounts, it makes no sense to not put a walking cycling trail in that connects Souk to the Goose and to the potholes and to the tourists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. So, Council, just for Council, that our agenda allocates 10 minutes for public questions and comments. Are you comfortable going beyond that? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Your Worship and Council, my name is Julie Budgeon. I'm at 6526 Water Street, and I moved here 4.5 years ago. We chose that location because we'd moved from a community where we did have to drive, and we wanted to be somewhere where we could walk and bike. And I'm in support of the trail. I biked here today with my kids and my husband, and I can tell it's a huge difference when you're biking with kids compared on Wadham's Way, biking on the trail where you feel some security versus on the shoulders. I'm fine as an adult. It's not as relaxing, but when you're with children, as Alan said, it's not necessarily the cyclists that are going to be always using this trail. It's the families. It's the people that are going out for a leisurely ride in the day, and I think it's a huge asset to have this trail. I also heard a disturbing statistic. 1 in 4 children will become obese, and I think that we need to move towards being active. We already are. I'm super excited about this, Mayor and Council that are in, and I'm happy that we're taking a step in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gail Hall, 2517 Souk River Road. I guess I'm one of the aging demographics that's mentioned in one of these letters. Would someone kindly at the table tell me how these letters are all directed to Ms. Temple, the member of staff? I didn't see anything in any of the publications telling us we should write letters to Sarah Temple.
Well, and Sarah Temple, Ms. Sprinkling and Ms. Hanson both handle a lot of these come for info, and then anyone can write letters to council on items if they're not available to speak to them.
I suspect there was a fair amount of encouragement that they do so, because the people that are speaking are mistaken in a number of ways. They seem to think they know where this trail's going. Council doesn't know where the trail's going, and they seem to think that they will be safe from Souk Road, and they will not. If they're going up Souk River Road, they're going to have to come off Phillips Road. They're going to have to ride down the right-hand side of the road, because that's what you do, and you're going to cross the bridge, and you're going to have to cross Souk Road at Souk River Road. You have had objections to this because you have followed it up in 49 ways. You still don't know where the trail's going. You don't know what side of the road it's going on, and you don't know what kind of a trail it is. And that's why you've got objections, not because we object to people riding a bike safely. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I could comment?
Yes, Mr. Howie?
The copies of the emails that I see they go to Sarah because she is the person who receives things addressed to info, which is one of our addresses. And either Ms. Temple or one of the other staff will compile these for council. We do not invite people to make comments on anything.
Thank you for that clarity, Mr. Howie. Next speaker, please.
Your Worship and Honourable Members of the Council, my name is Lee Hendricks, 2179 Henlin Drive, rather. I've been in Souk since 2007. I was a part of CERTA at one point in time, and I've been involved in a lot of the different cycling initiatives. When we were on CERTA, we submitted documents stating just how much money cyclists do bring in via tourism, as Alan was talking about. Christine has already identified the safety problems that we have, as has Mary. And again, looking at all these different things, all the benefits of having that cycling trail, the other thing that hasn't been identified yet is that it builds community. When we cycle together, you say hello to each other. We don't say hello in cars. We tend to have that building of community decreases crime rates. It tends to build up in more resiliency in a community as well when you build relationships in that way. I was out in Broadmead Village not too long ago, cycling out there, and it was a really incredible experience, just the camaraderie of people that take that route all the time, and they're just out for an afternoon ride. The other aspects that we talked about were health, and definitely for physical obesity is a scary one, but the other thing is mental health. We know now that we have to have exercise for mental health as well. So increasing that ability of people to connect, either as a visitor in Souk or as a person that actually lives here, is that we're providing those trails for health for stress release as well, because we need to physically move when we're all stressed out. And I think most of us are in a state of being pretty stressed out most of the time. So for reasons of mental health, stress release, and physical health, I think this is needed. Gail Hall mentioned that we shouldn't go forward because we don't know where we're going, and I really disagree with that. I think we need to go forward because we understand in principle just how valuable this is, and we will figure this out, and we will figure it out in the way that Stephen was saying, is how to build this properly. So thank you.
Ellen Lures, 5526 Souk Road. There's two things I want to speak to. One was the issue of the review for the fire review, and I'm wondering why we're asking the same questions again and again. Is that until we get what we want to hear? What does fire facing mean? What does it mean in a subdivision? Does it mean a moat around a subdivision? How are we protecting our properties? Questions should be on prevention rather more than on staff. We may want to look around the world how subdivisions and homes are protected, or if they are, from wildfires. Perhaps we can adopt these in our bylaws so staff can include the necessary wording to developers. There's examples are the proximity of housing one to another and the siding used on the housing. But what really upsets me is that you did already do the plan. You already have it, as Councillor Parkinson has already said. That what didn't happen is Council did not adopt that plan, that information that came forward. That's why it hadn't proceeded any further. Just for your information, there was no motion made to adopt that information that came forward by the Chief and Derek. So if that was done, first of all. Second of all, Council needs to decide what we have. Do we have firefighters? Do we have first responders? Do we have traffic control? Do we have search and rescue? What is the job description for the firefighters? Once you decide that, then it's easy. Decide what you want them to do. If you look at your agenda, it'll show you how many fires there were, how many first responders. I believe first responder calls were something like 363, and fire calls were around 30. So decide what you want your firefighters to be. Then you can say, okay, we're just doing fire calls, and do we need to have 100 firemen? Do we need to have 10 paid firemen for 30 fire calls? That's the question you have to deal with. So it's Council's decision. You decide what you want the firefighters to be. Now, in regarding the multi-use trail for the bike connection for the Goose Trail to the Souk Bridge on an already existing route, I had a bed and breakfast for 8 years, and we catered to and encouraged the Galloping Goose as a route, and as a group, we worked with that. And on our map and on our website, we had where to get off and where to cross and to go into Souk. And we never had any issue. Get off at kilometer, I forget what it was, 43 or something like that, and get down onto Dixon. It was never an issue. What you're asking for is a gravel road, and that's what the road is right now, is gravel, and they'd be traveling on gravel. I would like council to consider that is not what we're doing for our children, but what we're doing to them. We're not only adding more tax burden, we're removing the initiative of young folks to do and figure out recreations on their own. They'll make their way to the potholes, they always have, as you know. There's a loss of critical thinking and an attitude of expectation of everything to be done for us. We at municipal level have an opportunity to restore responsible, critical thinking and opportunity to our young people. We cannot and must not leave a legacy of debt for our children and grandchildren. We need to act in a fiscal and responsible manner to restore respect for our governance, whether it be through proper procedures, transparency, and or fiscal accountability and due diligence. There was something else I was going to say about this with the Galloping Goose. The maintenance cost was another issue. If you take on another park, you already have a maintenance issue as it is. You had to cut back on maintenance for the parks because there isn't enough money. It's part of your budget. You take on another park, you're going to take on more cost. You have a beautiful park out here, right outside your window, that is being used but has no washrooms, has no water, has no sewer, has no signage to say where it is. It could be used in a much more manageable way. It could be the jewel of our city. And you need to focus on what it is you want to be. Again, do one thing right. Do it really well. And then if this, you can generate income from it, you can have weddings, you can have family events, public events in there, and you generate income from it. Then as that goes, if you find that you're generating income, then you can go on to look at other parks and make sure that you can maintain them. But I think that that's a fiscally responsible and diligent way to operate. Thank you.
Sorry, can you press the button on the microphone,
Sorry.
please? Thank
Hi.
you.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Venditti. I live at 6978 Grant Road West. And I have no agenda. I'm not part of any committee. I haven't even been on a bicycle in years. I moved to Souk 3 years ago. My wife and I, now we have a young son, and we love Souk. And as much as we love it, it's woefully inadequate for infrastructure. I mean, for crying out loud, we don't even have sidewalks on Grant Road. This is 2015. It's not 1945. It's not a one-horse town. You have a town that's just on the cusp of being a great small little town, but you need to invest, and you need to invest it wisely. And I'm so glad that this council actually has prudency now and has direction and not just willy-nilly approving everything. However, this multi-use trail, so it's not just cyclists, it's multi-use trail, is one of many projects that need to be done. It needs to be done financially responsibly, absolutely. It can't be willy-nilly and helter-skelter. You have to actually plan it through. But for goodness sake, don't put it on the back burner just because you're afraid that it might, increase taxes. I'm all about not increasing taxes. I think we pay too much as it is. But it's how you allocate the funds. And we need to have infrastructure in Souk. We need the multi-use trail as much as we need a downtown core, as much as we need sidewalks, as much as we need many other things. So, again, I don't have an agenda. I'm just looking out for the best interests of Souk, and the trail is one of those things that should go ahead. I encourage council to be prudent, be wise, be thoughtful, and take this as well as any other infrastructure plans as a progressive thing, as a good thing, and not something to quash just because there's some interpretation. So that's my piece, and thank you for it.
Are there any other speakers? Calling twice. Okay, so that's the end of the public question and comment period. Thank you very much. We'll move into our agenda here, starting off with PI 1, that's 7044 Maple Park Terrace. It's a development permit and development variance permit. And I do have a statement to read on that when we get to the public input portion of it. So we'll begin with the staff report, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. The owner of 7044 Maple Park Terrace has applied to subdivide Phase 1 of the overall Spiritwood development, which is shown on the map above. The portion of the property affected by this application is about 3.1 hectares in size. The area is split zoned under the Spiritwood Estate Zone CD9, Area A being multifamily and Area B being single family. Because there are more than 4 lots being created, there's a multifamily site and there is environmentally sensitive areas within the site. A development permit that considers the environment as well as form and character is triggered. The applicant plans to construct duplexes within Area A, the multifamily area, and single-family dwellings on each lot within Area B, the single-family area. It's been determined through the application process that some remediation is required within the riparian SPIA, which will enhance the riparian habitat. These restoration works will be completed prior to or bonded for as part of the subdivision. The application has been assessed against the criteria of the official community plan, and it's been determined that the guidelines have been met. The proposed layout meets the zoning regulations with the exception of a proposed front yard setback on lot 10 to accommodate the existing house. Oops. So the applicant has also requested that the front lot line setback be reduced from 4.5 meters to 1.5 meters. The existing house, this map is not the greatest quality, but whoops. The existing house is on proposed lot 10, and it's a panhandle-shaped lot, and so the affected boundary would be over to proposed lot 11. The owner has agreed to meet all the BC Building Code requirements to address fire separation issues. This has been made a condition of the development variance permit. Staff has no concerns with the development permit or development variance permit requested by the applicant, and the applicant is here tonight to answer any questions.
Okay, question, Ms. Lashane. There's a number of covenants on the property, as I understand it, but this does not impact any of the covenants in place. The only change is just the lot line setback. Everything else, I mean, the zoning's the same, everything's the same except for the lot line adjustment. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the application meets all of the requirements in the zoning bylaw. The covenants that are registered, except for the variance that's requested. There are 3 covenants registered to the title, and they're related to riparian setbacks as well as traffic.
Okay, are there any, thank you, questions from council? Councillor Ray?
Yes, and thank you for your report. I was trying to get it up on the iPad, but it's not working. My recollection was when we were doing this back a couple of years ago, was that there was a second piece of property that was tied to this commercial development, and that's Mr. Clark and Janet Noseworthy's property. That was all part, my recollection, so please correct me if I'm wrong, all of that was part of that CD zone. So if it's part of the CD zone, what happens with their property with all of the stuff that council required the former developer to use their property to connect Blythewood?
Through the chair, the Spiritwood CD zone is specifically for 7044 Maple Park Terrace, and the neighboring property has a small lot R3 zone. So it went through a separate rezoning process. So it has separate covenants and a separate zone.
If I can, just a follow-up question. So when we were doing that, because my recollection was our former planner, Mr. LeBlanc, wanted Spiritwood to connect with Blythewood so the sewer and everything could go through. Because there was quite a discussion at the council table about, we actually had a lot of people from that Blythewood that came, wrong one, complaining because they didn't want that road to go through. So I'm just concerned in terms of the impact that we required of that second piece of property. In terms of, I don't have any problems with what's being proposed tonight, but I think as a council there's a responsibility there to make sure that the proponents of 7770 Merritt Place, because that was all part and parcel of the deal. So I just don't want them to be sort of left out there, holding the ball while we move forward separately. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Through the chair, originally the original owner of the property had some ideas and was working with neighboring properties and had applied with the adjacent owner to rezone that property, but nothing was tying the properties together with zoning or covenants.
With all respect, it's just what my interpretation was at the council table. It was very clear to me that Mr. LeBlanc was insisting that go through. So I just leave that. And other people's interpretation that were sitting here, it may be different. But.
Okay. Councillor Parkinson?
So explain to me the deal and what was going on between the two properties, why the developer of Spiritwood, he would like all the other properties along the line to come forward and make a bigger property? Like, why were they doing this? And if the other property owners were coming online with a larger development, why would the district be responsible for that? So explain to me what happened, as I wasn't here.
I'm not sure I can answer that. Mr. Howie? When we get to the public input piece, yeah. Or Councillor Berger, are you able to clarify?
Oh, no, I have no clarification. My comment was just that I can see that there's both proponents are in the audience tonight. And
okay.
So if we want to provide comfort to everybody involved, and I too don't have any issue with what's coming forward tonight, but just to provide comfort to the neighboring properties, maybe we could hear from both parties involved as they are here.
Okay. So perhaps I'll invite the property owners that, Councillor Ray, did you want to hear from?
Yes, I just want to make sure that any of the issues, because that is my recollection, and I stand to be corrected. I see Councillor Pearson's nodding his head. That was the impression that I was given, that they were connected, and part of that connectedness was the district wanted to put that street through. And
so that's the reason why for the other property.
Yes, and so I would just like Mr. Clark or Janet to be able to have a comment. I just want to make sure that in supporting the other application, that we hear from Mr. Clark.
Okay, so before we have the applicant speak to this, I just want a clarifying question through Ms. Johnson, through staff. So with what Councillor Ray said with the properties tying together, and then that was proposed, but then the applicant at the time didn't follow through with any of that? Is that what I...
The applicant and the owners had applied to rezone to R3, and for reasons at that time to use their land as part of the development. But the rezoning was approved as R3, and there was no covenants or requirements that the two properties be linked. And that's all the clarification that I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Councillor Casper?
I think what Councillor Ray is alluding to is that as a result of that public hearing process, and because the intent was to link the two properties in development as a whole, that there were covenants registered on the neighboring property that's not subject to the discussions here tonight. Is that correct? So my question then is this, is there anything in what's being proposed that is actually going to stop that from proceeding?
We got no
Through the
end,
chair,
yes.
I will let the owner applicant speak to that question.
All right, so I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward. If perhaps you can provide some background or some clarity on this. I just need your name and address, please,
Thank
for
you.
the record.
My name is Jack Jolseth. I represent 3 Point Properties. I live in 768 Cordova Bay Road in Victoria. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the time. We bought this property approximately 90 to 120 days ago out of a court-ordered sale. During our due diligence, we made it abundantly clear that the existing zoning was in play and that the existing applicant that we have, or application that we have here tonight, follows virtually exactly within that existing construction zone as far as its CD9. I've met with the neighbors who are lovely people, and I believe that clearly we've showed some options where their property can still be developed into multi-use fairly easily. I expect that this first phase would be done over the next couple of years. Our working drawings are finished and submitted. We're ready to go as far as starting our first construction as quickly as possible. This will actually create a nice entranceway through Wheelfield up to Maple Park Terrace, and certainly has the opportunity for us to work together in the future. Unfortunately, the deal that was proposed before financially just wasn't viable for the ex-owner, and quite frankly, not viable for us to move forward, not for any other reason other than just the marketplace doesn't dictate it, and we could not meet the financial requirements of the neighbors, fully respecting that they do have the opportunity to independently develop their properties. We actually showed how we could do that on the side, and the only reason we didn't move forward because it just didn't make financial viability to us. And so our application is based exactly on the development permit that is issued on this land. The only small variance is the corner for that house. So we're happy to move forward as quickly as we can and hopefully produce a vibrant, beautiful subdivision as it was originally planned. We've really looked at how do we make it as simple as possible to create rental housing. We have 14 other rental houses in the area with our existing partners, and we'd like to carry on with that kind of product, certainly for the first 6 lots. But I don't want us to ever shut down the possibility of working with the neighbors together, and anything that we can do to enhance our property that helps our neighbors, all of our neighbors, we're very happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pearson, do you have a question?
Yeah, and thanks for staying on the mic. I just and now I've got an understanding of what you're asking for. So it's just to go ahead with the existing CD9 zoning, right?
Yes.
And for the purpose of everybody in the room is that there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure given to Souk as a result of this development. There's a sidewalk, there's a sewer line, there's all types of things that have been put in place for this. It's just, I'm still a little confused about the covenants on the other piece of property, and I want to make sure that they're looked after through this process.
100%.
Yeah, and I have no objection to your development at this point because I think it's long overdue and get rid of that moonscape. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Does any member of council have any other questions for the applicant or his representative? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so I'd like to invite the adjacent, the address again, Ms. Councillor Ray?
I believe it's 7770.
7,000 Malrick? Okay.
Got the zeros and the sevens backwards.
I just need your name and address, even though it's 7,000. Sorry, can you turn on the microphone? Thank you.
Doesn't want to talk to me. I'm Dave Clark, and I live at 7,000 Malrick. And I want to talk about this and the Maple Park Terrace, and better known as Spiritwood. And we're here to see where we stand with the Spiritwood development. It all started in 2009. Staff suggested that they include Malrick, our property, for better traffic flow with the 2 cross roads, Brailsford and Mountain Heights. All development takes time to combine properties. Spiritwood secured an agreement with us for the purchase of our property in conditions were approved by council, and all conditions were approved. A third party property tried and couldn't get through, and we had to come back to council, have it all undone, and start over more public meetings, which none of this seems to have happened this time. This went to council and back and forth the step, and it was finally approved. All amendments were approved. The owner of Spiritwood paid for all costs for all the things on our property because it was involved. There's also a 219 covenant asked for by the staff, was put on 7,000 Melrick and paid for by Spiritwood. The property changed owners, but any permits, conditions, approvals, or agreements are still on the land of Spiritwood. There was no council meetings to take any of these conditions off. The new plan shows houses and roadway on the same piece of property. So are they going to set the houses on the pavement? Because the road has moved to the west. The road is not the road that's there now. That is where houses are going. On Thursday, we had a meeting with staff here, and they told us that the only thing tonight was a variance. We got home and see the computer on Friday, and there's a development permit also. And I don't know, there's the old saying that, some good deals seem good, but mostly likely aren't. The owner needs to clear whether there's liens, covenants, agreements, or any of this on the properties and how they're connected. The road roughly, like I said, is in the wrong place. It's all going to have to be dug up, and more noise and dust for the neighbors, because where the road is the houses. We don't care about the outcome as long as the development goes back and goes through the proper procedures, approvals, and new and different steps taken. These include requests made by staff for 7,000 Melrick for the covenant, the sewer. We had to buy into the sewer. We had to pay for the sewer to come to our line, which was all paid by Spiritwood. And if it's not going through the way it's supposed to, the way the agreements all are, we would like everything removed off our property with no cost to us, period. Because that's what the agreements say, and the 219, everything's all there. Thank you.
Any questions from council to Mr. Clark? Councillor Pearson, then Parkinson. If you could come back to the microphone, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thanks.
So basically, you're not objecting to the variance, development variance here, because that's just one line. As long as your property is not implicated in this development, is that kind of what you summed it up in that at the very end?
Pretty well, but there's some other things that were recommended by council. I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying, but one was water. They haven't got the water flow, and they were going to have to draw it from Brailsford. That's on the other side of the property. So we don't want to have to go through this process all over again. If they need water, we want to hold on. If they don't need us, then yes, just clear it off and forget it. But how they're getting water, I don't know. Maybe it's none of my business.
Okay, another follow-up question?
A question to Mr. Howie. In a situation like this where a partnership has been entered into, but then the partnership dissolves and there are some covenants put into place on a property that is not under the development permit now, right? Is it prudent for us to remove all those covenants off that property? Or is that a reasonable request?
I'd have to look at the covenants before I could give you advice, but it's an option.
Okay. Yeah.
On the question of water,
yeah,
that would have to be approved by the CRD, and that's part of building permit and other processes where we have to refer to make sure that there is adequate flow.
Okay.
Much as we had to with the co-housing development on Horn Road.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson, you're good? Okay. Councillor Casper, did you have a question, Mr. Clark?
No,
okay.
I
All right. Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering, do we know what it costs to remove the covenants and stuff? I mean, what amount of money are we looking at? I think it's important to understand what the cost is, and I heard Councillor Parkinson ask.
I don't believe we have a schedule of fees for that.
Okay.
I think it's just on application.
Yeah. I guess just as a follow-up, the thing for me is I don't want Mr. Clark and his wife's property to get lost in this process, because in my mind they were very well connected, and at the same time I support what's before us tonight by the applicant, but I just don't want them to get lost in the process.
No, I think council is there. Councillor Berger, do you have a question for Mr. Clark or just a general question? Thank you, Ms. Anything further for Mr. Clark? I just don't want to leave you standing.
The only other thing is the Spirit would approach the water board, and we got the letter there where they're saying they need the water. And that was before any price or anything was agreed with us, so I can't see how the water board's changing their views. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Was there a follow-up? Okay, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. And just for clarification, as an old developer, I really would encourage the Clarks to not remove your covenants, because I do believe, in answer to the water question, we took the simplest approach when we bought the property of what could we do with the existing zoning, which is what we've got there. I do believe when we get up to the top into Area B, we should have water across, and I believe that that will create value for all of us. So I'd hate to see the existing agreement that took obviously a lot of time and a lot of money, a lot of effort to design. Our whole plan is with the idea that once we get to the top of our land up to the house, that we will have to reconfigure this whole property. And I'd hate for the covenants to be removed and make your property worth less than it is today, because there are options. Now, that's none of my business, but eventually there should be a water conversation. Right now, we don't need any further water pressure. It was there before. That's exactly what we bought it for. Our plan is to move forward with this, but I would really hate to see the Clarks neutralize their existing value by going backwards and having a cost. Now, again, it's not my business, but at some point we will be having different discussions as we move down. I don't know whether it's 2 years or 3 years, but certainly at some point the whole subdivision that was laid out should be revisited. It's just now is not the appropriate time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson, you had a question? Okay. Councillor Berger, was this for the applicant's representative?
No, just a general
Okay.
comment. I agree with what Councillor Ray is saying, and as well as other people around the table. For me, I guess what I wrestle with is through the CD9 zone, we're talking about a secured agreement that happened previously with Spiritwood and the Clark family. So for me, that opens up a ton of questions. What is this agreement? Where in writing is this agreement? What implications does it have for the Clark family? How does it tie their hands in the future? And will that agreement be brought back to life, as previously suggested just recently with the new developer? I don't know if because the property went into receivership, does that make an agreement null and void? There's legalities here that I'm not comfortable with, and I don't want to see the hands of Mr. and Mrs. Clark tied in any way, shape, or form. But I also feel that if there's still potential and the Clarks are willing, then possibly the previous comment, maybe they should stay there if there is an agreement that could be going in the future. So to me, I sit on unsettled ground because there's too many what ifs. What is the agreement? Where is it written? Are we tying the hands of Mr. and Mr. Clark and they don't want to be? We need to look at what's going to work best for both. But if we're looking 3 years out, is that something that's comfortable and viable for the Clarks? And is there legalities with the agreement that we keep talking about?
Well, I think there's two moving pieces from what I'm hearing here. There's the item that we need to deal with today, which is a specific phase, which is the lot line, and then there needs to be another conversation because we don't have the information on those discussions. So it's difficult to make any sort of decision right now without that material in front of us for that particular item. This one here, you know, I think it's the case where this can roll ahead, but at the same time, it's upon us to look into those other pieces so that we understand exactly what's going on as this phase begins to develop over time. Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, or do you have a...
No, I just in continuation, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I don't have an issue with what's before us as well, and I would go so far to make that motion to move the recommendation, but I would also like to have the Clarks, you know, sort of on our forefront of how we're going to work together going forward, so no one's hands are tied and it works best for the neighboring property as well. Yeah, we just need to do the public input piece before I can entertain the recommendation. So, if you're okay holding that, Councillor Parkinson, you had a question?
Yeah, when Councillor Berger talks about the information and what was going on between Spiritwood and the Clarks, was the district involved in those negotiations, or is it just between those two?
No, there was discussions when, so whether it's zoning or...
But we would have that information ourselves. I'm saying we're not going to you to ask for information. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so pardon me? Yes, sure, if you have a follow-up piece, yes.
Right now, the road is aimed over, which is going to take in our property. And what he's proposing is to completely remove the road and put houses up against our property, which is cutting us off altogether. And then all you got is a narrow piece left, that he says, but who's going to put a road up and put houses on one side? No developer. It's just impossible. And the other thing, as far as water is concerned, when Mr. Smith and Mr. Rattan did Maple Park Terrace, they had to upgrade the pump on Furwood to supply those houses on Maple Park Terrace with water. And I'm sure they didn't make it big enough to supply all these houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. Just to make it really clear, there is no past agreements that we're involved in at all. There is nothing on the property that goes into the private conversations or the private agreements that are in place with the property that we've purchased. The roads that Mr. Clark is referring to, the road has been laid out on an old plan. We certainly intend to change that road as per our plan. The existing road that we're going to put in will have access to the property. So I believe that what we're doing, well, I don't believe, I know that what we're doing is not neutralizing the value of the Clark's property. In fact, it does leave several different development options. What we can't do is just decide that an old financial agreement that was negotiated and agreed to with different parties, we just can't inherit that based on an agreement. It's nothing to do with us, and I'm really sorry. I'd love to do whatever we can to help our neighbors and help the Clarks enhance their value of their property later on. The road that we're putting in does not neutralize their properties in any way, and there are subdivision possibilities that are laid out. So again, anything we can do to help, not take away. We're not here to hurt anybody or do, and I think all of us, for all of our neighbors, have to be incumbent upon the idea of helping each other and making sure that we don't do that. So we've been very sensitive to make sure that we do not take away value to the Clarks or anybody else's property. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casper?
I just have one question of the applicant. Is it your intention to do phase 1, 2, and 3 as one package right now?
Yes. In fact, the construction drawings for this whole phase are laid out. The working drawings are in place. We're ready to do our bonding and start doing that infrastructure. So what that will do is create a nice meandering roadway up from Winfield up to Maple Park Terrace, and it sets the stage. Our intention for the first 6 lots is to do very nice duplexes, and we'll use those as part of our rental stock and the single-family houses on there. Now, when I talk about 3 years, I want to make it clear, we could be having a bubble right now of a little bit of inventory and a little bit of marketplace. It may be sustainable, and we might be at the beginning, or it could drop off. So when I talk about 3 years, that's in our internal performance. It could be 2, and it could be 7. So I don't want to be held that there's any timeline. It'll be totally market-driven. But our expectation is to do the infrastructure and the roadworks right away. I'd like to be finished prior to Christmas, if possible.
So, and I know it's hard for you to make a prediction, but you're not going to come back to council and actually ask to go and do phase 8, which there is no connection to the Clark property, because the Clark property is joined by 7 and phase 11. So I you know, am like Councillor Ray, you know, really when we agreed to deal with the original covenants and the rezonings and everything on all these properties here, that it was viewed as one package and one integrated service plan for water and sewer and road connections from the east to the west.
Right.
I you know, from my end, you know, and I'm sure you can appreciate where we're coming from, is that really, why would we have rezoned the property if those plans aren't going to materialize? Even your property.
Mm-hmm. If you look
you
at
see,
our...
because the logic behind it was that it was a way to connect from a servicing point of view and a transportation point of view, so that there was less impact on the other service roads to the south and the west of your development that you've just recently purchased. So you have to understand why decisions were made in the first instance, and that's why the Clark's property was involved, because it gave greater options to move transportation vehicles, water and sewer services from the east side in the middle of the property instead of having everything come from the south. So you understand that, correct?
100%.
Okay.
And what I've done is come and done the due diligence based on the existing development permit that's in place, and the road that we've laid up does not negate any of the future development plans for the Clarks or us. And I think that that's what we really need to keep reminded of. That road access can still link those properties together. And I believe that at that, when the time's right, as soon as the marketplace is there, could be 2, 3, 4 years, we'll sit down and make sure that something is economically viable for all of us. And that's why I hate to see this thing aborted for no reason, because at this point what we want to do is establish what market is there and let us build that, take the moonscape away and actually create a nice subdivision and a community that we can all sit back and look at in a couple of years and decide what the next steps are.
So I have to repeat myself on this. You know, without prejudging, I want to hear from the rest of the public. But I don't want, you know, to see someone coming back and saying, oh, you know, things have changed, we want to do phase 8, and we want to do things from the other side, and not have anything to do with this other property, which changes the scope of the overall development. That's my number one concern, because this thing was put together as a package. And that was a decision made by powers that be around this table. Our staff had quite a bit of involvement, and 2 property owners ago, or 1 property owner ago. So,
our existing future development plans have used the Clark's property as an overlay with that intention. At this point, we cannot make the financial requirements of the Clark's work with our existing plan. So we have not neutered that process. We're not coming back for something that you won't be approving. It's never been our intention. It's not been our style over the last 35 years. We're community builders, not community breakers. It's not our intention whatsoever. So I don't want to put that message out. What we are doing is working within the existing development permit that's in place on that land. There is no prior agreement between us or anybody else, and there is nothing as a covenant on the property that suggests that what we're doing is different than what was agreed to by the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is council comfortable move on to public input? Okay, so there's just a statement to read here. These public input meetings are being held to allow the public an opportunity to make submissions to council on these particular items on the agenda. Any person who has an interest in the item will have an opportunity to make a submission to council. If you do so, please come to the microphone. Before speaking, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you. I'd like to invite anyone for this item in particular at 7044 Maple Park Terrace.
Ellen Lors, 5526 Souk Road. And I'd like to say I totally agree with Mr. Casper. That's unusual, isn't it? But it's absolutely so that it was the whole package came together, and the road was all together. It was all one package. And I don't know how you can change something after it's approved. And if you buy a property and there's an agreement made and a development property, I'm sure that the agreements must go along with it. And I would encourage council to ask staff to get a clarification on that, to make sure that you have, that those agreements are still standing, that they go with the property before you make a decision. And also, what I do see missing in this is food security. There is no community garden in this large development. There's no opportunity for a community garden, and that's part of the OCP, and it might have been a site oversight staff, but I would encourage you to make sure that that's a part of it. With a lot of discussion with food security as we've been talking, and we have to make sure that we're not just developing land and not having opportunity for people to feed themselves, and especially on the rock. Thank you.
Other speakers? Call for a second time. Any other speakers? Okay, third time, so we'll close the public input. Are there any other comments or questions from council? Councillor Berger, then Pearson. Pearson, then Berger. Councillor Berger, go ahead.
I just was going to reiterate sort of my previous comment, and I'll follow up with the motion as well. As this was going on, I pulled up our zoning bylaw on my computer, and all of the mapping actually doesn't show Brailsford going through, which I find quite questionable. So what I would like, and again, going forward, as I said to Mr. Clark, I do think that there's huge consultation that needs to go back and forth. I don't have an issue with the recommendation of the lot line right now, but I do think it's absolutely prudent of this table to get to the bottom of these agreements and anything that went on between your property, the previous owner, as well as the district. There's got to be an enormous paper trail, and I would love I would just like for our table to have a report from staff as to getting down to the bottom of it, because I don't want to see the hands of your property being tied whatsoever, and I don't think that's the intention. But so just to give you comfort from my own self going forward, I do support the lot line change that we're going for tonight, but the second part of my motion will be that work going forward with ourselves and you to get to the bottom as to why all of these terms of events have come forward, yet when I look on our website right now, there's nothing showing. So that's a huge gap for me, and I'd like to get to the bottom of why that is.
Yes, because they were working with, they had some
Sorry, Mr. Clark,
Microphone.
we'll
So-
have that, we'll
I'll
have
make-
that conversation.
So I'll make a motion to move the recommendation, but I'd also like to direct staff to work with Mr. Clark as well as bring back previous motions and previous paperwork that had dealings with his property as relation to the CD9 zone.
Okay, so that'll be the motion as stated on the first page of the report, okay? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. So I'll go to Councillor Pearson to speak to the motion.
Okay, yeah, and so you're including both of those in your motion?
Absolutely, I think
Just
it's...
move the recommendation, okay, because I was
I
going to
moved
make a separate motion that the staff be directed to work with the Clarks.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation going forward, but I'd also like to direct staff to work with Mr. Clark and get to the bottom as to why these covenants are there and what we can do to not tie the hands of your property whatsoever.
But for clarity, one is not conditional upon the other. That's like, this piece is going to roll ahead, and then we'll have a second conversation where we can get up to speed with what transpired on that property. Okay, Councillor Pearson?
Okay, I'm comfortable with that as long as there's the two motions on the floor. And
Well, one big motion.
Yeah, one big schmozzle of a motion, yeah.
Yeah.
To Ms. Luer's point, there is a giant park that's also part of this development right next door. If you look on the map, you'll see that there is a giant park right against this CD zone, and I think that that's part of that. There is some green space that was allocated to that. I know you talked about the food security piece of it. I also, I hope that the Clarks and that the neighbors can have good luck on this project, because it's something that's long overdue. There's been a number of hands change place, and it is a moonscape up there right now. And I think it's something that needs to be done for Souk, and I wish the developer good luck with this, and hope you can be a good neighbor to the Clarks and make that happen. So to the Clarks, I want to give you assurances that we won't forget about you at the council table. Thank you.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I just have one question. It has to do with the map on page 49. So there's a map and an outline. It's hatched, and it says this is the subject property. And then on page 57, there's specific reference to Lot A. And then when I looked at the maps further on in the other detail, there's only reference to Lot A. So I was curious as to why the entire subject property is actually outlined, but we're only dealing with Lot A. Is that, and in the written on recommendation on page 43, there's just a reference to Lot A, or is Lot 10 part of that?
So on page 49, through the chair, sorry.
Yeah, so there's a big area there.
That is the area that is subject to this development permit. That's the full area of phase 1, if you will. On page 57, it's actually a schedule to the Spiritwood Estate CD zone, so that's depicting the zoning on the property. So that shows two areas, Area A and Area B in the subject parcel.
But we're only dealing with part of Area B, correct?
Correct.
And then my last question is that in the maps or in the drawings that are shown on page 69 of the staff report, it says Phase A, and that looks like it's almost identical to Lot A. Is that correct?
That is Area A.
That is Lot A.
Yes, that's the multifamily site.
So would they be coming back to us for the rest of it without the detail? Because there is no other detail on the remainder.
The form and character requirements were only for the multifamily site, so that's what we were looking at. So
Okay.
that was the only reason we included Area A.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Answer my question.
Any other questions on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And then perhaps at the next, one of the upcoming council meetings, we can receive that other report. If you could schedule that in. Thank you very much. Okay, so move on to PI2. It's the 2015 annual meeting. I'm just wondering, Ms. Temple, is there a way to open this door just to get some more air? And I'm like melting up here. Sorry. Well, I'm just... The air conditioning, unfortunately, is not working again, so it's just cooking.
Apparently it's working in there.
I know. It's like, okay. Okay, so the next item is our 2015 annual meeting. And there's just a statement to be read here regarding this. The community charter requires each municipality to present an annual municipal report for public inspection and to hold a public annual meeting at least 14 days following the release of the annual report. At this annual meeting, council must consider the annual municipal report and submissions and questions from the public on the municipal report. The annual municipal report includes the municipality's audited annual financial statements for 2014, a list of the permissive tax exemptions for 2014, a report on the municipality's services and operations for 2014, a progress report on the performance of the municipality with respect to established objectives and measures for 2014, a statement of objectives and measures that will be used as the basis for determining the municipality's performance during 2015 and 16, the details of any declarations of disqualification made against individual council members during 2014. So at this point, I would like to invite any members of the public to come forward with any comments or questions regarding the report. And if you, as normal, could please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Chair Sklapowicz, 6519 Steeplechase. In your report with regards to bylaw compliance, quote, this has been a rather challenging year for the bylaw department due to a few property use issues that have consumed a great deal of time and staff, legal, and resources. I'm not going to go around the table again. I've said my piece about that, but with only 244 calls for service last year, and now as of so far this year, this will make 201 just for myself. I just want to ask town that they may want to consider up in their bylaw enforcement services and the staff in that department, because it's obviously going to be another challenging year.
Okay, thank you. At this point, there has been no plans to increase the bylaw enforcement. Any other members of the public?
Could I please have a total for what the total debt is and the total interest that we're carrying?
Question through to Mr. Dillabaugh, please.
Just give me 1 second, if you may. Through you, Your Worship, the total long-term liabilities at the end of 2014 was $6,700,030. 897. That's a decrease of about $500,000, and that's in the audited financial statements that have been approved by council.
And the total interest that we pay?
Through you, Your Worship, it's about 400,000, but the exact number is not in the financial statements. It's in the budget, though.
And of that total debt, where's the majority of the debt? I guess, is that the sewer, or where are we with that?
Through you, Your Worship, again, the majority of that debt is, yes, the sewer. We also have a little bit of debt remaining on this building, as well as long-term debt related to the ladder truck.
So do you have those amounts?
Through you, Your Worship, they are in the financial statements.
Which are? Is it?
We've received them already when our auditors presented.
Right.
And so.
Okay. So the three debts of the house are the sewer?
This building and the ladder truck.
This building and the ladder is what our debt is?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Gail Hall, 2517 Sioux River Road. Someone was up here a while back speaking about municipalities being in big trouble and the trail was going to save us. Maybe we should look at what is really damaging the municipalities, and it's the unfunded liabilities on benefits and so on that is trapping them now with people in retirement, and the municipalities can't pay that debt. I would like to know what our level of unfunded liabilities is at this time.
Through you, Your Worship. We, in the financial statements again, and this was approved by council and was audited again this year, it shows up as employee benefit obligations, and at the end of 2014, it was $193,000.
That's for 1 year.
But that is funded. That is not for 1 year. That is the outstanding amount as at the end of the year.
Sorry, your microphone, Ms. Hall?
I'll find it again and bring it.
If I may, Your Worship, what Ms. Hall might be referring to is the liability in the municipal pension plan. That is the entire unfunded liability of the entire municipal pension plan, not just the district's portion.
Okay, I'm going to go back and check. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public? Okay. So I believe that Mr. Howie, there's no recommendation here. We've already received the draft report, but is there a recommendation now? Like, would you require a motion then to close the annual meeting and accept the report?
Yes.
Okay, so motion by Councillor Ray, second by Councillor Logans, and that's to receive the 2014 with the public comments. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, so we're moving on to page 1. This is a public hearing. It's the amendment to Covenant FB 126369, which is 6527 Souk Road and Lot A. We have received staff reports in the past that have led us to the public hearing for today with the recommendation. So I think at this point, unless council has any questions about what's transpired, because we've already moved forward, I can just move into the public hearing report. Are there any questions about the staff report to date? Okay, thank you. I know we've received it, so. Okay, so here's the public hearing. The public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed modification of covenant will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the modification of covenant that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submission received to date are available, and you'll see those, council, on PH1. We've received package 2. It's important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the modification of covenant, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak at the appropriate time, commence your address to the council by clearly stating your name and address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed modification of covenant. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed modification of covenant with individual citizens. Everyone who deems his or her interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views known. To this point, I would like to invite any members of the public to please come forward regarding the amendment to the covenant at 6527 Souk Road and Lot A.
Hello, my name is Andrew Armstrong, 6521 College Avenue. I'm sorry I'm not too up to speed with the covenant restrictions. I just got the notice we were on vacation, and I'm here tonight because of it. If the building goes ahead with the 4-story building, our property value is going to shrink. We bought our house 2 years ago in Souk for a lovely mountain ocean view, and this is going to completely cut off our view and shrink our property value. I'm not too sure what the covenant is restricting in here, but I know that a 4-story building is going to severely affect our property value and what we would be able to resell our house for. So I just want to put that in record right now.
Okay, if I may, sir, just to clarify that this is basically to remove a commercial component, so there's no modifications to sort of the density or the scale of the project. There was just a commercial component that would be removed, and that's the amendment to the covenant.
Okay, I just wanted to put that forward right now.
Understood. Thank you so much. Other members of the public?
Ellen Norris, 5526 Souk Road. Just to confirm that the purpose of the covenant or the OCP was that this land, we wouldn't lose our water views. There'd be a view corridor, and where the land, where this house is, or apartment is or whatever it's going to be, is placed, that we don't lose our water views, and that there be a stepping, and the buildings are to be stepped into the land, and also the parking is to be underground and not exposed to the residents. And as the gentleman says, it takes away from their residential views. You know, to hiding it behind isn't an option. So it's not. So you don't see it from the road, so it's not there. It's supposed to be underground parking, and the buildings are supposed to be stepped into the landscape. Thank you.
Other members of the public? Call for a second time. Does the applicant wish to speak to the project? Any comments?
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, Jack Cholsa, 3 Point Properties, to represent this property. The covenant, just to be clear, there's already a covenant on the land that actually was a minimum of 4 stories, maximum of 5. We're actually reducing the height of the building to 3 stories with parking that is underground, so there is no viewscape from Souk Road as far as parking goes. So just to make that clear, that the covenant is already in place, so whatever view the gentleman before has mentioned has already been gone by the existing permit that's in place. So just to clarify that, we're actually reducing the height of the building, not increasing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I can call a last time for any further public comments. Okay, so on that, I will close the public hearing, and we will return this back to council. And there is the recommendation there that council approve the modification of covenant, and it's just as stated, and to authorize the mayor and CEO to execute the modification of covenant. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Berger. Any other comments on the motion? The only comment that I'd like to make is I speak in favor, and thank you for bringing forward the reduced scale. The property is one that, since I've been in office, I receive a complaint about on a weekly basis. It's full of sort of derelict stuff and a bunch of invasive weeds. I just feel that this has been my only opportunity to speak about it. There has been attempts to have that property cleaned up, but it's just kind of sitting there. And particularly now with the improvements happening to the building next door, and the facade improvements and the like, it's sort of like what's going on with that property. So it's not a condition that I'm making to this application. I would just like to see that property tied up, because it is the first thing that you see now when you come into Souk, and it's very untidy. So I look forward to some cleanup. Thank you very much. Anything further from council?
Sorry, Mayor. As far as the clarity of cleaning, we inherited the property from another property owner, and that's certainly our intention, is to tidy it up as quickly as possible, which is what the application is meant to do.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
I understand that. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving into our bylaw piece, and perhaps, if I may, I'd just like to take maybe a short 2-minute recess for council, just to perhaps get a fresh air, use the facility, and then we'll come back before we hit Sioux River Road. Thank you.
It's for the entire thing. We've had them come in, and I'll contact them again tomorrow and tell them that we need to figure something out.
I think Brent might have contacted him while you were away. Because this fan isn't working half the time.
If we can start moving back to our seats, please, so that we can continue on with the rest of our agenda. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving into our report section, and first up is RA1, the Souk River Road property. So this has been something that we've been working on for quite some time, and there were different items you see in page 1 that we were looking for from the committee of the whole, and there's been some reply, and I know that staff is still waiting for a few other pieces, but so perhaps I'll turn this over to Mr. Howie, and have you speak to this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a couple of comments, and then Mr. Dillabaw's got some information as well. One of the questions Council asked us to investigate was the permission from the ALR, or ALC rather, regarding the use on the ALR land. We have not received a reply to that request. As of today, I checked as late as 3:30 this afternoon and sent another email to the ALC staff at that time, and we do not have a reply. Depending on how Council wants to proceed on that issue, if Council does tonight make some decisions regarding placement of the horseshoe pitch or the trail on that particular land, they could always do it with the proviso that we get approval from the ALC. And Mr. Dillabaw's got the information on the surveying of the land and the rough cost of providing at least, I think it's based on 6 horseshoe pitches on the north end property that Council was looking at.
Thank you, Worship. So just in, following through on the update items, we did get a survey post done for the northern property line for that property, and that's included in the supplementary package this evening. Further to that, we had a local contractor go down and look at the property based on now knowing where the property line is. And they've given us an approximate estimate to put in the horseshoe pitches up at the top of the property. And as Mr. Howie mentioned, the estimate is to put in 6 horseshoe pitches as well as a parking area. And that's on page 3 of your supplementary agenda, just a rough sketch that we received from that contractor. And their estimate is approximately $15,000 to do that, including the fill that would be needed in the one area. So that's the estimate that they have provided for that, bringing that forward, including the fill. I think that covers what was still outstanding, and if there are any questions from Council, I'll do my best to answer them.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I have a question. Who's the contractor?
The contractor that we had go out and give us the estimate and look at it was 4M Bobcat.
So I'll have to declare a conflict of interest due to a relationship by marriage to the owners of that company. So if there's any discussions on that, I can't partake in those discussions.
So that would be perhaps when we get to a point where we award a contract to them, but I think, can you stay in the room for discussions on the overall use of the property?
Well, on the overall use,
yeah.
But I just wanted to let everybody
Sure.
know at this point. So I'm not going to participate. I can't on any other action.
Yeah.
Spending it like that. Okay.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Okay, there was another item that's listed in the report here, and that was to confirm with the ministry that the proposed changes in the trail route and change in trail treatment does not impact the grant eligibility, and it looks like there was a response for that.
My apologies, I didn't touch on that. Yes, we have confirmed with the province that the change in the potential route would not impact the eligibility of the grant.
Okay. Councillor Logan Zenray?
All right. So in my studies with youth in Souk over the past few years, one of the top comments is that we are taking out too many trees for our developments. Youth in Souk leave to work and travel and to get education, and they come back here for our natural environment. Removing trees to accommodate a parking lot goes against everything that these youth want to return to. The horseshoe pitch, in my opinion, should be placed in its original location, and that location was clear to me when we discussed it first, because I remember talking about not removing trees to accommodate the pitches. And that's what I agreed to. I also want to note that I understand that the comments about opening up the view to the river, but the trees and the birds were there before our desire for a view, and admittedly I'm a bit of a hippie, that's my emotional stance on this, but the desire of Souk's youth is clear, and for that reason I cannot support removing trees on this land in order to move horseshoe pitches due to parking requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Ray?
Just a couple of follow-up questions to Mr. Dillabaugh. I don't seem to see a price for the work. I see the survey, but just in terms of the price of $15,000, that doesn't include putting the actual pitches in. Right.
Through you, Your Worship, that estimate, and one of the reasons why we didn't include it is it's not an official quote. It was just an estimate that we received. We would have to go through proper procurement if we were to go down that route. That was to clear and make available the land area that's in this sketch, as well as put crushed gravel and everything like that, but not for the installation of the actual horseshoe pitches, is my understanding. But to bring it really, I think, kind of to what the level is at the current location right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pearson, then Berger.
Okay, thank you to the staff. I guess before we answer any questions, we need to know whether we can do anything on the property, right, from the ALC, right? I guess is the first thing, and I heard what you said. So, and as far as some of the controversial pieces of, and I appreciate what Ebony Logan, or Councillor Logan said. Those are kind of alder trees that used to be able to see the river when I was a kid. They've kind of grown up there as weeds anyway since I was little. So I hope that the horseshoe pitch guys are kind of reasonably satisfied that we're trying to make this work and going to happen going to that end of the park. And I appreciate some of the work that everybody's done, and hopefully we're moving in a direction. I don't know whether it feels like we've moved anywhere or not, but hopefully, I don't know what we're supposed to do next.
Get some information and then figure out our step forward. Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. And unfortunately, my comments aren't going to come to a surprise to anybody because I've been saying the same thing for far too many years. But now we've added $15,000 to prepare land for 6 pitches. And I've voted against this, and I know the Horseshoe Club takes my comments, with a grain of salt, but I've continually voted against this because since day one, they want the opportunity to grow and host tournaments. They came to us for 8 pitches, then 16, then 21. They want to grow. And again, I don't support this piece of property. I don't support sending $15,000 for 6 pitches. It doesn't work for me. As far as the trail and stuff goes, I would like to see some sort of mapping as how that can be incorporated. I'd also like to see, if we're talking about both of them, I don't know if we are, but I'd also like to see some sort of mapping of how that's incorporated onto this piece of land, and then what the costs are. Are we back down to the original grant of $75,000? I might be out of the loop here because I missed the last committee meeting, but so on the trail component, those are my questions. What does it look like? How much is it going to cost? As far as the horseshoes pitch people, I still can't support it. I'm sorry.
Councillor Parkinson?
I too find it hard to try to vote on an issue like this when we don't know what's actually allowed on the land, whether parking's allowed on there, whether we're allowed to take it out of the ALR, or for the trails too to be built. We should be waiting to hear back from them before going forward, because why make staff do all this work each time and we might not even be able to have the trail there or the parking there? So far, from my understanding, the horseshoe pitch is allowed there, but from my understanding, that's the only thing allowed there right now. So why would we be making decisions on something we have no control over just yet? I think we waste a lot of staff time by doing reports when we don't have the full information from the government or where else we have to get it. So how many reports is this now on this?
Well, there is quite a few, to say that, and it's the case of we need, we're waiting for answers, and this is our meeting. So we have a few answers, but not all of them. Councillor Ray?
Thank you. And I was just to follow up on Councillor Parkinson's comment. I think if we're going to be looking at putting the trail and having that mapped out, I do notice in the yellow documents, the supplemental information, that we do have correspondence from Butler Brothers. And I highlight this because it speaks to some of the comments that we've made in discussions about the possibility of a different route for the connector trail off the Galloping Goose. And so it's page 9 of the yellow. And in this document, there is serious concern for the safety of people utilizing, who actually already cut across the Butler property. And with that being said, I think, again, it's a word of caution for us as a council that we're talking, and I support a connector trail, but we don't know what the cost is going to be. And if it can't come through the Butler property, along through the hydro piece, the BC Hydro property, there's a chunk of property along Souk River Road where there's nothing to the west side of it. It's quite a drop and on somebody else's property. So if we can't do a multi-use trail off of the roadway, we then run into issues of having it on the road. And because if it's on the west side of the road and you're using the roadway for that as a bicycle path, then you'll need one on the other side, going the other way, because you got to get back from Souk back to the Galloping Goose. And if you do that on that side, there's an issue about the parking at the community soccer fields. So I think it comes back that as much as I know for the Horseshoe Club, this is going to be a challenge. We have to get our ducks in a row. We are trying to mesh 3 different pieces, and we need to have all of the answers first. And it starts with, what can you do on that property? Can you put parking? And then if you can't, then we need to have somebody, or if you can, we need to have somebody look at the area along Souk River Road. Can you put a multi-use trail? Because on one side you probably can't, the other side maybe you can, but it all impacts parking at the fields. And so we've got to move forward. I know it's hard, but you got to move forward, balancing all 3 or juggling all 3 of those issues. And to do one without the other, staff are going to do reports, and we're going to come back and we're going to have questions and say, well, what about this? So that's my comments.
Okay, Councillor Pearson.
Okay. So for Councillor Berger, I think that the piece that you probably missed out on is that to get the horseshoe pitch to try and fit it at the north end of that property, and I'll say north end of the property, we would be giving them equally prepared land. That's the cost. That was what it would be, like just to get it sort of prepared so they could start building their pitches on it. In exchange for the parking that would be across from the potential all-weather field. That's where we came up with that sort of workable solution. So the $15,000 is in exchange for us using that parking unencumbered. So I guess I want to know if I guess there's a couple pieces here. We did survey the land to have a starting point. That's what we had requested at the last meeting. We've done that. Staff's done that, which is great, and I thank them. So now we have a rough drawing. Is it enough to start the horseshoe pitch off with some horseshoes? If it's not, you're going to have trouble with getting me to vote on something in that park anywhere. We've been bouncing around, and I read the editorial comment in the paper this week, and I kind of had a chuckle to myself about, somebody said it was a good editorial, and I was thinking that was kind of like the captain of the Titanic saying, missed the iceberg. But I don't know what to do next. I mean, if it's not going to fit there, it's never going to fit there, never going to, well, then I guess we're back to the drawing board.
Okay, so where it stands right now is, Councillor Parkinson is correct. For this land, the only use permitted is horseshoe pitches and I believe parking for the pitches. Parking for the playing fields is not yet a permitted use of this. And the trail is not yet a permitted use. When we first looked at the trail, it was to be in the municipal roadway going up Souk River Road. And then it was the case of, well, we don't want to put it there because then it'll impact the street parking that's currently happening for the playing fields. And so there are the three moving pieces. And it's the case of, okay, I also supported back in January the location of the horseshoe pitches based on the information that we had received. They went to work and all that sort of stuff. And then it became apparent that other members, and that's fine, do not support the location. I'm getting shakes from the Horseshoe Club saying that the north end of the park isn't going to work. And so in some ways, if that's not going to work, looking at putting the money into it and then not end up with anything doesn't make any sense at all, because then we're going to end up with cleared land that nothing's on and that nothing's happening on. So we're sort of stuck here, and I think it's the point where we can, there's some options. It's, as we wait for more information, I mean, there's clearly we need to wait. Like if the ALR or ALC comes back and says, no, you cannot do any parking on there whatsoever, then that rules out the whole playing field component. They say, no, you can't put the trail there, then that's nothing. Then basically we're left with horseshoe, it is as is. And then we need to decide if we're going to honor the agreement or cancel the agreement that's currently in place, because there is one. Or, I don't know, you fence it off and let a future generation figure it out. And then in terms of the trail, the clock's ticking. We have to have that completed by a certain timeline, which means we need to decide how we're going to proceed with that because it needs to be completed, I believe, in early 2016. So those are the pieces where we're at. And it's what step do we take forward now? I mean, the horseshoe pitches to me have almost become this symbol. It spanned 3 councils, and I know that we all have things that we want to accomplish in this town. You know, that would be great to see. And it's like, gee, we can't even put a horseshoe pitch in, and yet all these other things. So that's why it's like, no, there's got to be a way to make this work. Councillor Ray?
I guess your comments have brought me full circle. And having read all of the, you know, where the original motion, notice of motion occurred. And I think what doesn't sit well with me to have one particular use for this property is the taxpayers of Souk paid almost $800,000 for this piece of property. And I have to say, to have one group benefit and such a small group, and I understand you want to grow it, $800,000 is what we paid. And I think that there has to be a broader benefit to the community of Souk with that property. The other piece, and you've heard me say it before, I've never been really in favor of providing land for specific interest groups, but I've gone along with that because that was what the council of the day said. But here we are, as Mayor Tate has said, 3 councils later, a phenomenal amount of staff time, council time, your time coming here. And I think we have to be mindful at the end of the day, it's $800,000 worth of taxpayers' money, and there's got to be a broader benefit. And, you know, for the Souk Horseshoe Clubs, if this doesn't work for you, I almost feel then you're going to have to find your own space and not on the taxpayers' dime. Sorry, I know that's not what you want to hear, but if you can't help us make it work, you know, Councillor Pearson and I went down and had a conversation with you, and you guys were down at the Community Association the next day going, well, you know, what have you got here? Like, we're going in circles because we can't seem to all be on the same page. And so those are my comments. I think we have to remember how much the taxpayer paid for this, and that there's got to be a benefit to the larger community of Souk rather than just, at this time, 10 people with the Horseshoe Club. So I encourage you to help us make it work.
Just clarity that some of the proceeds to acquire this were from other parks that were disposed of and closed, so they weren't necessarily parks that were acquired initially by taxpayer dollars. They were parts of either decommissioned, green spaces, and that's how the land was arrived at, but point taken, absolutely. Councillor Parkinson.
I'm on the same wavelength there where we paid $800,000 for parkland, and I do not understand why the parking can't go further down where you would like the horseshoe pitches to be. So we take a beautiful parkland where people can go around regardless of whether the horseshoe pitch is there, but you go down to the estuary down there and you can have your trails. And I just don't see taking $800,000 and making it a parking lot. For me, that is wrong. So if it can be moved further away down so that the parkland is there, I would agree to that. But $800,000 for parkland and turning it into a parking lot, no.
Okay. Councillor Casper.
Yeah, the area that's the flat part isn't all of the park. I think people have to put it in context. And if you're going to utilize the land that was purchased for strictly park purposes and you want the public to use it, common sense would dictate you need parking.
Right, but not the whole thing.
And common sense would dictate that when there's overflow from activities across the street and that the streets are crowded and that they're parking on the edge of the curb and people can't get by, I think that all of us have to kind of wrap our heads around that and try to find a solution to that problem. Whether it's our problem or not, it's one that we're going to be faced with. We'll get the phone calls, we'll get the complaints, our police will be issuing tickets for people who are parking on the blacktop, and people will then complain to us, well, why is that happening? And even though we have no control over the activities across the street, no matter what they may be now, but in the future, we will have control and we're going to be part of a partnership. And we agreed to enter into a partnership on a multi-purpose field through Sea Park, the District of Souk, and monies we will be receiving from Sun River. That's what we earmarked potentially these monies for. So I think we have to accept some responsibilities on that. And I think the safest thing to do, I hate saying this, is to wait until we get an answer from the Land Commission.
Of course.
That's the safest thing for everybody.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I don't want to see anybody make a decision that cuts off options. And if somebody wants to go forward to do something on the north end, and if it's accepted by the Horseshoe Club, well then I could support that. But I think really we have to wait until we get some answers. I'd be hoping that the commission would have been, pretty quick on the mark and actually giving us some indication as to whether or not we can park cars on a piece of land that we're inviting the public to use. It doesn't make sense that we didn't get answers to that when the property was bought for that purpose in 2011. Kind of crazy.
Councillor Berger? Thank you.
Thank you. And further to what Councillor Casper said, and he hit the nail on the head, when we purchased this land 2 councils ago, it was for, and the discussion was always wrapped around the fact that we're taking our children from the elementary schools on a bus or parents driving them to Swan Lake to enjoy the estuary when we have one right in our very own backyard. So there was never a formal park plan done, but the discussions around that council table was that we need to protect the estuary and eventually when there's money set aside in a park reserve plan, build that up similar to a Swan Lake type park. So the marshland down below, the vision was to have lovely floating boardwalks, maybe an interpretive center up top, and then of course the up top piece would be passive parking so you can utilize the estuary down below. I don't think, and again I'm assuming here, I don't think in any ALR park that I've been to there hasn't been passive parking. So the parking wouldn't be designated for the soccer club, nor would it be designated for the horseshoe pitch. It would be designated for the estuary so people can go down and enjoy that land and look at the estuary and all the nature that is there. So that's the key piece that's missing. That's the dialogue that happened 2 councils ago when I sat at the table. It was never formalized into a plan. And that was on the onset of the Horseshoe Pitch as to why I didn't agree with it being on this land. There's no park plan that has that clearly laid out. And that was the history of why that parcel was purchased, to enjoy and protect the estuary.
And that is correct. There is, when we looked at the options, there was also some historical context, I recall, both in terms of First Nation use of the lands and also potentially that Captain Grant may have landed there in the river. I just remember something about that being said, but also about the birds and the like, in that you don't necessarily want people walking there because of the nesting that's occurring in like the grasses and the like. So that is the case. I don't see parking. Parking is an issue all over Souk, and I don't see it that people are going to need a pass to say, no, I'm here to play ball or I'm here to take a picture of the river. It is parking for all users of the area. Councillor Logans. Okay, sorry, I saw your microphone open. Councillor Parkinson.
I thought the purchase of the land intention, and the first part was to have the bridge go over from there. That's what I was under the understanding, what it was for. But I think that we should wait until we have the information before we can make decisions on what can and cannot happen there. And before we send out staff to do more work, we should know, can we have it there? Because if we can't, why bother doing the work?
Okay, so I think there are unanswered questions, so I'm hearing that sentiment around the table. I think in the meantime, it would be good to get more feedback from the Horseshoe Club, why the area won't work. You know, there was the discussion that occurred with the task force, and then things seem to have changed. We do need to have those answers on the other pieces, because there's no sense in laying out where a trail is going to be if we get told that we can't put it there. So we are missing those pieces. I was hoping that we would have those answers by today. I know that staff had been following up with people nonstop over the past couple of weeks to get those answers, but today's come. We were waiting that perhaps there may be a verbal update. They're aware that, you know, that this was on the agenda. It just hasn't happened the way we'd like it to unfold. So I'm looking for a motion by council so that we can move along. Councillor Parkinson? Okay, so the motion was that council wait to receive the answers. Your microphone wasn't on, so just sort of restating it for the public before proceeding with any further discussion on this parcel. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Ray. Any further comments from members of council? Councillor Pearson?
I guess there's a lot of pieces to this, and there was some good public comments tonight about the bike park, and I hope that, and I see some of the bike people have stayed. And it's interesting is that some of the comments from people who want the bike trail also recognize that there is some inherent dangers with where that trail has been planned. The crossing on Souk River, it's great to build a trail, and you know the bike grant and all the things, but there is some real dangers associated with crossing the road on that side of the river and things like that. So this has to be carefully thought out. It's nice to have a bike grant, and I think that we're all very much supportive of increasing the bike trails. But that area is not really a great area. When you actually go down there and physically walk it, and you heard people talking today about walking up to the potholes, that area doesn't lend itself well to a bike trail. So we've got some big challenges. I think that there's some other alternatives there. I want you to understand is that this council does support access to the Galloping Goose. I'm just not sure that that's a well thought out plan. So very challenging for us. So it's all part of this. So just to comment about that because the motion's on the floor.
Any further comments from council? Okay, we'll be back maybe September, hopefully, if not later this year. That'll be nice. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Logans is opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Our next item is RA2, Public Spaces Garbage Collection Award of Contract from 2015 to 2018. We have a staff report. Would that be Mr. Howie?
Yes, Your Worship. This report is looking, we went out to a proposal call to collect garbage basically from our municipal garbage receptacles around town and to do cleanup and to generally keep the town clean. Previous to this, going for proposals, and we did that as council has instructed us to look at pretty much every contract that comes up to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck. There are a couple of things that were changed in the proposal from previously, from the previous arrangement, which was just based on a purchase order and not a contract. Those items that are additional items, such as garbage bags and taking care of the receptacles, cleaning the receptacles occasionally, were over and above what was covered by the purchase order, and that cost us approximately $11,000 a year. The way we've written the contract up, we now include those other things, and the contract that we're proposing calls for a $6,000 increase in that figure. So that's one significant increase over what we previously paid for, but it's based on a higher level of service. It's based on including costs that we were incurring by invoice into the contract. The second one, Council has endorsed corporate energy and emissions plan, and that goes to organics and all of the things associated with that. And so that has added some cost as well. We got two bids, one of $33,000, rounding it up, and another of $137,000, which is a tremendous difference. But we feel confident that the low bidder has the qualifications and the experience to do the work. And so the recommendation is that the contract be awarded to the single proprietorship named Angela Sinclair at the price of $33,232.56. That does exceed what we have in this year's budget for that purpose, and it's mostly based on what I've previously just explained, of about $8,400. We can absorb that within the existing engineering budget, so there's no need to look at using contingency or any other source of funding. So that's our recommendation, that the contract be awarded to Angela Sinclair and authorize the mayor and CAO to sign the general services agreement.
Councillor Logans?
One question, if I may, to Mr. Howie, because I'm a bit new and seeing the $100,000 difference is like, what? Do you know, or can you possibly give some explanation as to why that might have been?
I don't know the other company. I don't know either company actually personally, but I just think it's a question of maybe who has what work to do now, and that can quite often really influence a bid. If a company's already really busy, they usually bid higher than somebody else who might not be as busy and can put the work into their schedule. I also don't know what the differences might be in overhead. I mean, this is an individual that has submitted the $33,000 bid.
Thank you. And I did want to say that I appreciated, it says that the proposal will see refundable bottles and cans donated to the Souk Food Bank and other charity bottle drives. That's a nice thing to see, and I would like to move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Ray, or pardon me, seconded by Councillor Ray. Okay, Councillor Pearson. Microphone.
No, actually, Councillor Logan's asked all the questions.
Okay, Councillor Logan's covered your questions. Councillor Ray.
Yes, just a comment, and that is I would suggest that where it talks, I've lost the page already, where it talks about the other bottle charities, I would suggest that we keep it specific to the Souk Food Bank. And the reason I suggest that is it identifies one, because then who picks and when and how often and how much. The Souk Bank does rely and comes to the community grant table, so I would just recommend that it only just be the one. It takes that discretion out of the hands of the contractor and leaves it with council.
Okay, would you like to add a friendly amendment then? And that way it's designated. It could be put into the contract.
Okay. Is it in the contract?
We can put it in if you just...
Okay, yes, and then any bottle recycling funds go to the Souk Food Bank.
Is the mover okay with? Okay.
That's the friendly amendment.
Perfect. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? So, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. All right. Agenda distribution, RA3. So this has come up because we've often talked about our ability to process information with the meeting schedules. Agendas are released on the Thursday, and of course we meet on the Monday. And that can be a challenge for staff, for council, to get through just to get the feedback or the answers or to read the reports and the like, and to do so we've been looking at how we can look at shifting the agenda distribution. So staff have talked about this and have come up with an idea that would start September, because we're taking a break. Any special council meeting that would be called would be very specific, and this is sort of in the report here. And then the idea is we could trial it for 3 months and then review it, see how it works. There's a possibility that more supplementary information or new business items would roll in, but we do face that on an ongoing basis. So, Mr. Howie, with Ms. Sprinkling not here today, do you have anything further to add than the report?
Not really, Your Worship. That was a good synopsis. One of the other reasons for doing it on a trial period is that if it becomes permanent, it'll require a bylaw amendment to your procedural bylaw, and there may be other things at that time that council wants to consider, but we thought it was best to suggest a trial period before making those amendments, just to make sure that council is happy with the new process. There will be times, I think, when there will be late items that will have to go out based on emergent need, but you know, the mayor sets, along with myself, we set the agenda, and we would keep council's policy in mind when doing that.
Councillor Casper?
Well, it's a long time coming, because I was asked in 2006, I think it was, to work with a former CAO and our corporate officer to actually prepare a report on doing just this. It wasn't accepted by the council today because they felt that it would have a potential negative impact and create time delays for stuff. And I argued unsuccessfully that when you set a wheel in motion and here's the timelines, everybody makes adjustments, and it should create no delays. But the most important thing is that it will allow us as council members and the public to have all the relevant information that's going in a report well in advance of a meeting. And I've just found it over the years pretty difficult. You know, this is the paper version of the agenda, okay? That's the paper version. And so that's 200 and something pages. And to get that on a Thursday and to try to digest it in a meaningful fashion to prepare for tonight and the public also, it proves difficult. So I strongly recommend that this be embraced by everybody. Thanks.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, I totally support the motion. I think it's timely. And the other difficulty that I think is actually tied to this that I would like to raise is when you get the paperwork and then you start to try and find the old public hearing packages, the committee of the whole packages, all of those stuff. They're not up to date, I think because it may be a space issue on the web server, but I'd like to have that conversation so that when it comes to trying to do the research, and I've had a few opportunities lately to have to rely on a phone call back to staff to get the information. I think as a transparency for this district, I think all that information should be easily available on our website. So if I want to go look at a decision made in 2009, I can get the public input. The minutes are all there, but that does nothing for me to know who was at the podium and what they had to say and the dialogue and the staff reports. I don't have access to them. So I know that's quite a task, and I know it will take time, but I certainly hope that we can move towards that to support council and the public having access to the information.
Okay, Councillor Logans?
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Casper. And yeah, I mean, the argument where you've heard before, Councillor Casper, where it'll cause delays. Well, if we're not informed properly, we postpone the decision anyway. So, you know, I'm glad to see this happen. So any further comments? Councillor Parkinson?
I just wish the agendas weren't so big.
This one is big because we don't have an August meeting, so it's all jammed on there. I know. It's only 10. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I look forward to this coming up in September. Okay, moving into reports for information. RA1, Fire Department Quarterly Report. Just at the beginning when we talked about approval of the agenda, we just sort of wanted to focus on the first two parts, but thank you. And then the rest will sort of follow with the review. Any comments or questions for our fire chief? Move receipt by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Logans. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's probably been said, but I just want to thank our staff for the activities and the follow-up regarding the Grant Road fire. I know Councillor Pearson and I were at the district picking up our agenda information and saw that the staff were here working on the weekend to provide, you know, emergency accommodation, and in speaking with the Red Cross, et cetera, and these other agencies. So I just want to say thank you.
Did you want a bit of an update on that? Just, yeah, sure. Just a couple of points. The Red Cross did call me on this weekend, and they've either found accommodation, or residents have found accommodations, all but one, or they've stopped calling, asking for help. They weren't sure, so they're still looking at it. So everybody at this point, except for one person, has somewhere to go, they think. It was a pretty complex incident, and you know, trying to deal with everybody was probably one of the more challenging things we've ever had to do. And if I could just make one recommendation, and I think I'll put it on public record for everybody, make sure you have really good insurance on your house. Because of the asbestos contamination, anything pre-1990 that you live in that is going to have asbestos, everything in that building was classified as a hazardous materials, and since the residents didn't have insurance to clean it, it all gets thrown away. So they can't have anything, no matter what shape it's in. So that will apply to anybody, I would imagine, that's out there that lives in a pre-1990 house. Make sure your insurance covers the cleaning of contaminated as a result of fire.
Thank you, Chief. That's a good point. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, and thank you, Chief, professional as always, and I'd like to thank you for your leadership throughout this. I know you went way over and above trying to help, you know, get people accommodations at the Prestige Hotel, and I know that it goes beyond your duties sometimes as a chief, but as a citizen of Souk, I think you went over and above, and I want to publicly recognize you and thank you for that. So well done.
Thank you very much, but it was a huge team effort. There was There was probably close to, counting the firefighters from other towns, there was probably about 60 people involved in dealing with that, not counting the Red Cross.
Any other further comments? Okay, all those in favor of receipt? Carried unanimously. Okay, next one is RA2, quarterly variance reports from the first and second quarter. This was a piece that council had asked for just as we move through our budget year. You see that quarter 1 and quarter 2 are both here. And there's a bit of a schedule that Mr. Dillabaugh has in mind for sort of quarters 3 and 4. Some of it depends on our meeting schedule and then also when those reports are available. But any comments or questions from council regarding either report?
They're actually a separate attachment.
Yeah, they're on the same page.
Yeah, they're on the same.
It was separate from the agenda.
It's a separate PDF. And it has a District of Sault logo on the cover page.
Oh, there it is, yep. No, if I can?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I read it online because I had 3 hours on Saturday to
3 hours.
read. There was just one of the items that seemed significantly over budget, and I certainly recognize in some of the areas we pay up front, but my recollection was it was like 168% over. So it probably doesn't help you, does it?
I'm looking.
I understood the one on the interest on the refundable deposits. I understood that one. There was one, but I can ask you at another time, Mr. Dillabaugh.
Councillor Casper?
So I guess the most important question, was it a big amount of money for 168%? Or was it a small amount? And my only comment, it relates to building inspection revenue. Because it's below what was projected, but it all depends on what comes through the door. I know there was a rash of applications that came through in December. A number came through, but whether or not people have actually paid their money to initiate those building permit requirements in order to do a building under the old building code requirements as opposed to the new ones that took place effective December 20-something of last year.
Yeah, the big rush was on to apply before the new building code kicked in. And I think there were something like 44 applications received at that time. As far as I know, the necessary permit fees have been paid.
Oh, okay.
I think we're continuing, although they're down for the first quarter, because what that did was that gave last year a boost, 44 going out within about 2 weeks. There seems to be a steady stream, but I'll get you a report on that for the next
right, and
meeting.
I fully understand and appreciate that if someone pays money in one fiscal year, those funds, from an accounting perspective, have to help pay the cost of what that permit is for, because it's a 4 or 5 or 6 month process, and so it's a carryover, it's a flow through, and sure, you receive it that year, but it doesn't end there. So I think we have to put it in context.
If I may, through your worship, the other piece of that is, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Casper, is that we collect the money up front when they pay for the permit, but the work that we do can be over a period of time. So we actually, from a financial statement perspective, recognize that revenue over that entire period. These statements and documents don't actually reflect that. That's reflected at the end of the year when we actually look at what the total amount is carrying forward. So there's a bit of a difference between these quarterly statements and what will actually be recorded as revenue.
Any further comments or questions from council? So I get a motion to receive those reports.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ray. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Next one is RI 3 2015 property tax collection. Okay, and that's to receive the report by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. RI 4 is the wastewater operating and maintenance contract. So this has sort of come here as to introduce council to this. As you may recall, our agreement with our service provider EPCOR will be expiring on September 30th, 2016, and it'll be timely for council to begin exploring the options as to what we're going to do with the sewer. So there's sort of something different options for council to think of, and I don't expect anyone to make a decision on any of these options tonight. It's a case to introduce it, something to think about. Early in the year when we looked at our committees, there was talk of forming a sewer services committee that would sort of look at delving into these options in greater detail. So that's another piece that council could look at considering is the formation of that committee. Otherwise, we'll just bring it back to council and go through those. So I guess over the coming weeks is to think about what sort of information you would like to receive to sort of expand out these options, and then we can start to roll forward on them. So are there any questions on the report? Some summer homework for everyone. Councillor Casper?
I just want to make sure that before we even contemplate entering into a public process, that we have apples to apples comparisons on the cost implications of contracting out and operating or having the services come in-house. And I think that's critical, because I think everybody has to understand this, that the current contract has clearly earmarked that there are QP union rates being paid in those agreements. Mm-hmm. And that's a decision by the corporation that we've engaged. And so we have to look at those things in context. We also have to look at the fact that the duties of our staff relate to the supervision and the monitoring of that operation. And I guess my last point is this, is that we as a municipality are 100% for the outcomes of that sewer system. The permit is in our name, it's not in anybody else's name. And so, you know, by saying, oh, well, we have a private contractor and they're 100% responsible for everything, well, no, it really doesn't work that way, because the current contract is very carefully written that any major expenditures over $5,000 we fully fund. And that's over and above the current contract for the labor and the operation. So I think there's a lot of factual information that has to come out and be made available in plain language so the public understands before we even think about getting into an engagement process. Because otherwise we're going to create confusion. And I dare say that in 2011, when there was a so-called review on sewer services and contemplation of a 25-year agreement, that process, in my mind, did not take place. And that I really think that it was a mistake by the previous council some time ago to embark on a 5-year contract. And it was just a snippet of the 25-year agreement. Nothing really changed. So anyway, I'm going to leave my comments at that.
Yeah, and that's why we're going to do a more.
Yeah, I think so. We have to do it. We have to do it, but I think that the public has to understand, because you know, really, this thing is an expensive proposition. It is a major expenditure for a lot of people.
Sure.
$550 a year, right?
Yeah.
Goes to the operation.
Yeah, so that's why there's different options, and we need to get up to speed ourselves, okay? So at this point, it's just looking at the recommendation is that council receive this report on wastewater operating and maintenance agreement, staff to schedule a committee of the whole meeting in fall to discuss the matter further and to allow for public input, but I sort of look at that as a beginning of public input. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Berger. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, opposed, carried, thank you. Well, it's, sorry? No, that's in the correspondence section. So this was, well, I guess those were just background pieces there. Yeah, okay. So next one is RA5, options and feasibility for the development of Goodmere Road. And so one of our priorities have been to focus on the town center, and then through our budget planning, I believed, we have sort of talked about ways of creating these linkages throughout the town center towards the water. And so there's been some dialogue over this over the years, and that's where there's different options here that staff have presented to us to consider, along with roadway drawings. Pardon me, Mr. Howie?
And like the last report, Your Worship, this is basically provided for information, just to get council up to date on things like using what we can possibly use under DCCs for this project. And there was a question, can you use latecomer agreements to do the works? So this again was just really to, and as somebody said earlier, provide some summer reading, and we would organize a committee of the whole meeting on this topic early in the fall.
Okay, questions from councillors? Councillor Casper?
Yeah, and I don't want to sort of rehash, what you and I heard at the meeting that we attended. But I think that what we have to make sure is that when we reach that stage, or when we have that meeting, is it possible to have some numbers, cost numbers, and that type of information?
Yeah, some of them might be, plus or minus numbers, but yeah, that's our intent.
And the possible source of funding?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to throw a suggestion out that if works aren't started on the Throop Road connector to Phillips Road this year, i.e. engineering work or even physical work, like real work, shovels in the ground, then we look at the option of redistributing some of that money for these projects or this project. I'm just throwing that out.
The Throop Road project we've applied for funds through the Canada Build, and I'm not so sure we're going to get any. Recent announcements have been coming out, and we haven't been on the list so far. So if there is no grant coming, that was a condition of doing the project. So that would free up funds for council to do other things.
Councillor Ray?
Yeah, just a quick question, as a matter of attendance at the meeting that you had that discussed Goodmere Road. I just see that Randy Clarkson is in the gallery this evening. I'm not sure if he was part of that process, but he certainly has the history in terms of that proponent, that background. So I just want to make sure that we get a fulsome view of what's needed for that. Means all the information.
His office was in attendance. Okay, so at this point, there is just as similar to the last one, is to receive the report on options. Is there any other further information that council is requesting at this time or looking for at this time? Anything come to mind? Councillor Pearson?
Well, I think that as a council, I think strategically we've talked about Goodmere being open, and it does start forcing the development down that way, the way that we want from our OCP and our vision of our downtown. So I think I like what Councillor Casper said earlier about if what's the most economical projects to go forward with. So I think that certainly we should be keeping our focus on Goodmere Road going forward.
And I think the other piece that I see with this is that if council doesn't support anything with Goodmere, then this report is just received and we're not going to move forward. So I guess what I'm looking for is with this, you do support, the motion is that, you know, with the committee, the whole, is that we're going to be furthering this dialogue to actually see what the feasibility is. So I just want to see where council is strategically in terms of moving along, or is it the case that, okay, we've heard a lot about Goodmere and it's fine, but, you know, we don't want to move ahead, so it would just be good to know that. Councillor Ray?
I certainly support it. I brought it forward as a capital item to be considered in this fiscal year, so you
Okay.
certainly have my support to move forward with it.
Okay. Councillor Pearson?
Well, I would make a motion that we keep the discussion on Goodmere alive, and in coming months, we consider it. I don't know what else we could do at this point, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing with the sewer one is that we have to deal with that.
right.
And so this one, it's the case of, you know, we don't have to deal with Goodmere, but certainly as we want to develop the town center, it makes sense to have these conversations one way or the other. So that's where there's been dialogue about Goodmere for years now, but no implementation, no action taken. So that's where it's the case of, okay, let's actually start making some inroads here, or connecting roads, or whatever you want to call them, to actually look at furthering this. So that's where the way this is, it's to receive the report for information, but the other piece is for the committee of the whole, and to discuss it further and for public input. So that means we're sort of rolling along there. But I don't want to have staff go and do more information and then we're like, no, we don't want to do Goodmere. Forget it, right? Because then that's not reasonable.
Okay. So
Okay.
my motion is to move the suggested action that
Okay.
that it comes back early in the fall of 2015.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further, that was seconded by Councillor, any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to RA6. That's the one that we added, and that was just a time for council to give any verbal updates. This is sort of our last scheduled meeting until September. So I'd like to take that opportunity. Councillor Ray?
Yes, just around the Vancouver Island Library Board, the expression of interest, I believe, closed today, Mr. Howie, at 2 p.m. And on July the 29th, the Library Board, along with Adrian Weiss, our manager here, is holding a community consultation. And that'll be held at CASA, July the 29th. In the evening. I just can't remember if it's 6 or 7. Sorry. That's all I have.
Okay. Councillor Berger? Sorry,
We're all looking at each other thinking, what's happening?
I had the U16 in my mind as I was looking at you there.
Yeah, no, on behalf of the mayor, I had the privilege of welcoming 180 families to Souk for the provincial fast pitch championships that were held here. Souk, actually, on a side note, had 6 teams that advanced to the provincial championships at different levels. 3 of them were the boys' teams that were here in Souk, and both the U16 teams in their division got a silver medal, and the U12 boys won gold provincially. Yeah. Awesome. And then the U16B team will be advancing to Western Canadians on August long weekend in Regina.
Oh, that's good. Anything else from members of council? Okay. So I have a few things. As you may know, the Scouts held their jamboree. Earlier in June, I believe, I was invested as a First Souk Scout. It's not me personally, it's the role of the mayor. We've supported the Scouts for quite some time, so this was the, I can't remember the name. It has a proper name for what it is that I was, along with some badges. And then at the actual jamboree, the opening, there was just under 3,000 Scouts and about 900 volunteers. And Scouts are very sustainable, so they're basically dropping a new town, like a town of people, into the community. But it's a light footprint, so in terms of fire, like for jamborees, they haven't used fires for years because of it. Everything's recycled, gray water, they have their own water supply, their food, anything that's left over goes to the food bank. All the other infrastructure pieces that aren't used, they have a garage sale because there's no point in storing stuff. It gets weather beaten. It's not usable in another 4-year time. They are returning in 4 years as well. Some of the things that was kind of neat at the tour, there's like the different badges, there's different groups. So you're in Orca camp, and these camps had like, one of Orca had I think 1,000 people camping in the one area, and then they all go around and trade badges, so each scout kind of receives all, like 5 of the same, so then they can go and meet all the others. So this will go in the mayor's office as well as a picture that was given. So it was a lovely opening ceremony, and it was good. And then everyone that was attending then during the jamboree put on the official jamboree banner, and then they have different challenges, of course, that they have to get for their badges. So they've been all over town. So that was pretty cool. I met with a representative from Shaw Cable. Shaw, is always competing with other broadband or internet providers. And what they have offered is, any Shaw users will see Shaw Open. So as you're going about, you can jump. You don't need to use your data. You can go on to, if you're a Shaw user, you can automatically connect into these hotspots all over. So they have said that if we're looking to have public Wi-Fi available, not just for Shaw customers, they could actually put our council chambers onto Shaw Open, and then anyone with Wi-Fi that wanted to come in, whether you're a Shaw user or not, would be able to access that Wi-Fi network. So that's where you have some, if you don't have a data plan with your iPad and someone's trying to read it, they could jump onto the network, turn off their data, and use theirs. So I'm wondering if that's something that council we can have a presentation from Shaw in the fall to do that, so you could hear more about it, and then we could look at offering that free Wi-Fi, and that way it's not bogging down, because we don't have a guest account on our server, and even if our server had issues, we could go on to Shaw Open to make our iPads work. Okay, Councillor Casper?
Yeah, no, I think that's timely. When I was in Edmonton, I did speak to the Shaw public representatives there, do their public relations, and I said it would be nice if they did come and speak to us about some of the proposals.
Yeah, okay, so that'll come. We'll look for a date for that in the fall sometime. The Consultants Derby will be on this Saturday, sort of a Friday-Saturday weekend event. They've raised over 10 years $100,000 for Souk salmon enhancement. It's a bit different than a normal derby where there's a large cash prize. It's team-driven, and then there's a big prize table, and people can choose things off the prize table. So I'll be there. They are expecting, I think, 320-some participants, and all their families come in. So it's a big, it's really nice to see the interest here in Souk. And then the proceeds going to various salmon enhancement initiatives, so that'll be taking place. And the last piece to share is that there's a new development in town. It appears to be somewhat of an expansion project, sort of an unexpected process occurring, but it seems to be forming somewhat of a natural course of events. I've heard or received note of an estimated completion date sometime in mid-December. And I suppose over the coming months, you may notice that I'm getting a bit round about the waistline. And it's not because I'm putting on excessive weight. It just appears that there's new shoes to fill coming into our family. So just have to share that. Bit of a surprise. Thank you. Okay.
A first for Souk Council.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, so on that note, we'll move on to the council reader file of June 2015. There was a request that a lot of this be pushed out by email so that there's opportunities for your council to view the materials and not just be bound to going through the binders. So it's here for June. I still want to have it here, though, so that if there's any follow-up, we can follow up and discuss those items. So a motion to receive. Councillor Berger?
Did we skip by correspondence required action?
Oh, yeah, we did. We missed that whole section. I apologize for that. It's sticky in the wrong place. Well, maybe, okay.
I don't mind moving that one.
Okay, why don't we move this one, and then we've removed it. So moved by Councillor Berger, receipt. Seconded by Councillor Casper. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry. Thank you very much. So back to C1. It's correspondence from June 24th from the Provincial Eating Disorders Awareness Week regarding Eating Disorder Awareness Week. I just have to go back there. I believe, yeah. It's just the challenge with this is that we don't have lights to begin with, so I appreciate certainly appreciated, but at this time, I don't know that we're able to participate. We're still trying to get our Christmas lights on. Okay, motion to receipt by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion? Councillor Ray?
I just note that Ms. Strain is just asking for a response either way, so if we could just respond.
Yeah, and then we'll direct staff, thank you, but at this time, we won't be participating. It's just, we don't have personal lights. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Our next item, C2, is an item just from Dr. Chris Bryant regarding the property tax increase and how that's impacted. It seems to me, though, that because we had a zero across, that a lot of this would be more from assessed value. I haven't looked at it in depth, Councillor Berger, than Casper.
Yeah, I would like to move receipt, but I'd also like to possibly have Mr. Dillabaugh contact Mr. Bryant as a family dentist here in Souk, as well as the president of Souk Minor Fastball. He's sort of out in the public, and if there's some information that needs to be brought to him, I think it would be excellent to have you contact him.
Okay. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, and I think it should be pointed out that the residential tax ratio, the 0.1, the 1, hasn't changed for residential, but the rate or ratio has changed for businesses over the years, and it has dropped, and that's that multiplier. And I think that has to be pointed out historically, that over the years, that amount of money that's generated has actually gone down, but the residential remains the same. It's 1, and we're residential is picking up 84% of the bill, or is it 86% of the bill? Yeah. And anyway, I think it would help to put it all in perspective.
If I may, Your Worship, I just wanted to touch on this a little bit as well, is the overall rate, tax rate for Class 6, which is business class, actually in 2015 decreased by 1.73%. This property, the assessment on this property went up by 33% from 2014 to 2015. That is the reason why he is paying more tax this year.
Yeah.
So it's not the rate, it's his assessment went up by 33% in that time period. And that is BC Assessment, they're independent, that's not the District of Souk, and that's the conversation that I can have with him, but that it has nothing to do with us. The rate actually decreased, it's his assessment, and those are the two factors, of course, they get multiplied together to get to your taxes owing. So that, I just wanted to clarify that, just in case there's some concern about, is there something going on, that sort of thing, but that's the reason why his taxes went up so significantly this year.
Okay. Maya? Councillor Ray?
I'm just wondering if that's a reflection of the recent purchase of the Royal Bank property, that was significant, and of course any kind of major sales and stuff in buildings start to get reflected in those assessments. So, because for just a building to go up that much in Souk, there must have been, BC Assessment must have relied on something else that's sold in the district, or had been assessed at a higher rate.
And if I may, that certainly is a factor that they look at. They look at a number of factors. The other factor that may be, like, they blanket assess, but they might have actually looked specifically at his building and reassessed it this year. There's a number of factors there, but again, that's BC Assessment that is doing that. That's not the District of Souk that is doing that.
Okay, so at this point, we require a motion to receive and for Mr. Dillabaugh to respond to. Okay, moved by Councillor Casper. And anything further? No. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. C3 is correspondence received from Brian White regarding a Souk tourism destination proposal. And so I've been in contact with Dr. White. He's with Royal Roads, and he's a resident over in East Souk and for quite some time, and has done workshops here within the community. And sort of where we're at now is that we have a number of various plans and the like that have occurred, and there's a lot of opportunities here. So sort of what he's offering is a team assignment through his master's students. And so they all come from a variety of background, but with a real focus on tourism and transforming destinations course. So basically what they can offer us is 13 master's students to basically take a look and to come back with a report with some recommendations. There's no cost for us. It's just a matter of time. So maybe to access some staff time to get access to some of the reports that have been developed over time, of which we have many, and then also some interviews or dialogues with member of council. And then, you know, it is a component of the mark or the grading that the students get, and then we would get quite an interesting perspective. He would be overseeing this along with one of the other instructors, Ray Freeman, who's also very familiar with Souk. So I was just looking to see if this is something, Councillor Logans and Pearson?
I did something similar in university in Belize and presented to mayor and council. And it was very helpful to have that outside perspective. I think this is an excellent opportunity for us just to get that third-party review and really timely, great for our tourism. So I definitely support it and would move the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Loggins. And what I liked about this is it talks about the town center development, and it's very timely for us. And I think it's something that I'd like to put a motion out there that we explore this. I'm not sure how to direct staff to go ahead with this, but I think it's something that we should do because there is no cost to us, and aside from some staff time. So I'd like to make a motion that we get Mr. Howie to approach them to go ahead with this.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Logans. And any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. That's great. And we'll probably receive something sort of October, by the end of the year anyway, and that'll roll into budget, roll into budget cycles. So. The next one is from Souk Yoga and Wellness. And this is a request to waive park fees for the rental of Ed McGregor Park on Saturday, August 8th. Moved by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Parkinson.
I have a question.
Comments? Yeah.
So when we move the fee for that, they still have to pay a deposit, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it would be
refunded.
Refunded, yeah. That's my understanding. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, I2 is correspondence regarding the Environmental Operator Certificate Program regarding the facility reclassification. So this is just an item that we have received here for information. Any comments or questions? Moved receipt by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Logans. Councillor Ray, any comments?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what that means at the end of the day.
There are 3 levels of certification. We're at the medium level, a level 2. So what the third level would be a higher, either a higher efficiency or a higher effectiveness rating on the actual system, the sewer system.
Okay. So it doesn't class the system, it's how it's operating then?
Yeah,
It's an
and it
operator's-
deals with
okay.
the treatment
okay.
rather than with the transfer of the sewage.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
So can I just, yeah, and I hope that it's not sort of construed that we're actually seeking to do this, because there is no statutory or legal requirement for us to exceed the permit requirement when it was originally issued. That standard that was issued was the life of the project. And yes, if it was to be a new facility, or if there was to be a lot more expanded use and activity outside the scope of the original project, then yeah, I can see the provincial government saying, okay, you have to make these changes. If the City of Victoria and those people aren't treating their sewage, we have the highest standard, probably one of the best treatment facilities on southern Vancouver Island. So, you know, it's all very well that we have this level, but you know what? We're paying for it. We're not getting any additional assistance from anybody for doing anything over and above the call of duty. So we have to put it in perspective.
All those in favor of receipt? Opposed? Thank you. So next one is I3. This is correspondence from the UBCM. We had discussed early on about our resolution about following through with our referendum plebiscite question about restating opposition to the oil tanker traffic. So this was endorsed at the AVICC, and then it's carrying on now to UBCM. So just mindful for those attending that there is an opportunity to speak at the podium. So I would recommend that you take that opportunity and do so. Stir them up. All right. So motion to receive, please. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Casper. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. An item here from I4 from a local business owner regarding sewage treatment for Souk residents. This is sort of here, ties into our earlier discussion about receiving the options for sewer treatment. So I just thought it could be here, something for you to think about. More summer reading. Just looking for a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Casper. Councillor Casper would like to speak to it?
Yeah, just, I hope that if we're going to acknowledge the letter, that we also point out that there is an opportunity for people who live in that area to actually fill out the petition forms to ask the district to expand the sewer system. Like, that's always available. And if they came en masse wanting to expand the sewer system in that Whiff and Spit area, whether it's phase 1, 2, or 3, then why not? Somebody has to be told or explained that here's the process you go through, and maybe this individual could help spearhead that.
Okay, so another
He's got
option
a lot of energy.
then is to send a letter just advising of that. Okay, so we'll add that to, receive and respond. Okay, okay. Well, it's an amendment, so if you just respond with a letter. Okay. We good? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So if staff could put that together, great. The last one is I-5, and Councillor Ray had talked about the community consultation event occurring, I believe it's 6:30. Excellent. Okay. This is the library consultation. Okay, so mark your calendar. Motion to receive, moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Casper. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So now we just will adjourn the special council, and council will be returning in camera.
Your Worship, did you want to release the names of the Parks and Trails Advisory?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes, just to rise a report to release and notify the public members of the Parks and Trails Committee. So motion for that? Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Berger. All those in favor of release? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, yeah, I guess we need to announce some. Pardon me.
So, Council earlier at special in-camera meeting appointed the following individuals to the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee. Kendall Arnold, John Boquist, James Boutillier, Debbie Clarkson, Ross Reed, and Mark Ziegler.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll just take a break, switch off everything, and then we will adjourn the regular open part.